but we're gonna have fun. Now, here's the number one thing that I wanna tell you guys. The first thing that hit my mind this morning was this, because it just happened yesterday, and it happens all the time. And I want you to really, really, really focus on this, because I will call you out on it if it happens. If you're talking to another human being and you've got a guitar in your hand and you're playing it, that is the number one most disrespectful thing you could do to another person on the planet. So and my buddy, I told my friend this the other day. He goes, man, what's one of your pet peeves? I said, I'm going to tell you exactly what it is. I don't even have to hesitate. Does anybody have a pen? Yeah. Let me see your pen. And my buddy goes, what are you talking about? And I said, look, let me show you. Are you listening? You got to listen. I want you to listen. So here's the thing. This is a loud room. It's live in here. There's a lot of noise. There's an air conditioner. There's traffic out here. And so for me to be able to do my job well today, I don't want to be distracted. Tell me where you're from.
Los Angeles.
Keep talking. Tell me where.
I'm from Los Angeles.
What else?
And, I noticed, why the fuck are you doing that?
Exactly. Exactly. That's what it's like when I'm trying to talk to somebody and they're noodling on the guitar. That's exactly what that's like. So to drive that point home, just don't do it in here. And don't do it out there. And don't do it in there. And don't do it to your kids. Don't do it to your wife. It's the worst thing you can do, is be talking to somebody and somebody sitting there going, yeah, man, it's like, dude, don't ask me why that's such a big deal, but it just is. It's extremely disrespectful. So now that we got that out of the way, let me read down this list and see if this sparks some questions of any kind. So this is some things we're going to get into. Zooming out and getting back to what we're doing all this for in the first place, which is making music. We want to be able to make music, and that doesn't have to be complicated, but it does have to be musical. We're going to talk about how language and music are parallel. This is a language, and we're trying to communicate with another human being via, this is our voice, or that banjo back there is your voice. Hopefully, maybe not, but you know, whatever instrument you play is your voice, and you're trying to talk to another human being through this instrument. So the same dynamics I'm talking about with listening and communicating and being a good listener and things like dynamics and phrasing and you know, if somebody comes into the room like I am right now and just yelling at you guys, you know, you're going to go, oh my God, this is too much. But if you sit across the table from somebody and start telling them a story like this, and they lean in and they go, man, this guy must really have something interesting to say. It's like, it's going to be a lot cooler than me coming in here and just, if I came in here with some loud amp and I'm already playing a bunch of power chords, you guys are going to be like, dude, get me out of here. This is too much. That's like screaming at somebody, right? So phrasing and these little things, you know, that it's directly related to speaking a language. It's the same thing. So the quicker you can think of it like that, the better off you're going to be. Okay, we're going to talk about the cage system and how I hate that, and how I think it's a stupid name. I think it's confusing. I hate the word cage system because it sounds like something that somebody just invented, the next greatest blender that they're trying to sell you. And so the cage system, I think, is a horrible name, but the actual application of what they're trying to tell you is the exact thing that changed my life on the guitar when I was about 12 or 13 years old. And I'm going to tell you exactly why, and I'm going to show you exactly why that was. And so I just don't like to call it the cage system, because I think it's a very confusing thing. I'm going to show you some phrasing tricks. I'm going to show you some musical exercises that are not robotic, that are not, that are musical, that you can actually use, you know. It's all about making music. I'm going to tell you what changed my life on the instrument. I'm going to talk about playing with some intent and not noodling, having a tonal center. These all come back to the foundations of making music. I'm going to talk to you about the 4 very important sounds: major, minor, dominant 7, major 7, and how to access those with a very easy, very fundamental, practical couple exercises. We're going to talk about guitar and the setup, and we're talking about some gear and how unimportant that is. We're going to talk about groove and timing. We're going to talk about planning the work and working the plan, because guess what? That's what works. And I already told you my number 1 rule is don't play your guitar when you're talking to another human being. Okay? So does that spark any questions from anybody right off the bat? Because otherwise I can get into this no problem. But
we have a secret word here, which is if you get someone new to the scene, you yell the word pasta, and they will basically shut the hell up. But it's like a nice way of saying I prefer something.
okay. Hey, thanks for the coffee, by the way. You think I'm amped up now? Wait till I drink this. Okay, so there's a lot of people in here, so I'm not going to get everybody's names right off the bat. We'll get to that as the day goes on, but I want to dig in here and get into some stuff. So do any of those topics, should I avoid any of those, or do you want to get into all that stuff? I think that's all very valuable stuff. So does anybody have any questions? Let's start with you, my friend. No questions? Anything but no math or science questions, please. Let's go from here. Let's pan over from this side of the...
Do you have a practice routine that you tend to follow? Like a guideline of some kind that you used to work on something or
I don't.
get better?
No, and I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Well, so I think, so that's a good question. So I don't have any practice routines, but when I was a kid, I played all the time. And so I played with my uncle after school, and my parents would take me to these bluegrass parties where there would be this many people sitting there, and they'd be playing fiddle tunes, and people would be singing John Prine songs and Bob Dylan songs. And the bluegrass community is pretty amazing, because if all you guys were sitting in a circle, the hot pickers would be in the inner circle playing the songs. They actually knew the songs, they could play them, they're executing, they can solo. And then as that circle grew out to the side, you'd have the guys that were like my dad, who could play 3 chords barely, and he's out on the thing, and he's just trying to keep up with the thing. So as you got better, as the young kids on the outer circle got better year after year after year, they'd move into the inner circle. Now that wasn't planned, but that was just a great natural progression of how to approach making music. I mean, it was a very hands-on. Nobody was talking about the cage system, or they weren't talking about your thirds and your minor thirds. It was just, man, you're playing these songs, right? And so that was a really cool way to do it. So I played a lot of guitar when I was young, and then that just over the past 35 years, it's just been the experience of playing all the time. But as far as a practice routine, here's what I don't recommend. It's like if you go to the gym and you just work you see these guys that are huge like this, and then they look like they're riding a chicken. Their legs are that big. I was like, well, this guy's skipping leg day, you know? So it's like if I'm working out my arm, which obviously I don't, but if I was to just work out my right arm for 6 months and then I go, okay, now I'm gonna switch to my left. Well, you're gonna look like Popeye. You know, you gotta do everything equally to get this workout, right? So on the guitar, I don't recommend doing stuff like this. I mean, that doesn't sound like music to me. This doesn't sound like music. You know, that's like, okay, well, if you're going to do an exercise like that to warm up, which that's great. We all have to warm up somehow. I just pick up the guitar and start playing something. It's not a calculated effort to really practice. I think a lot of people are kind of like overthinking this stuff to death, and it's killing the music. And so we got to get out of our analytical mind. You have to have these foundation fundamentals, which I'm going to give you a crash course in here in a minute. But you got to have, like, knowing the fingerboard and knowing the chord shapes and your constellations on the fingerboard. That's like a chef learning how to boil water or make toast. You got to have that. Now the other part of this is hearing music and trying to make some music. If you're fumbling around on the guitar trying to figure out where your hand's supposed to be, it's never going to happen. You have to start learning some fundamentals You don't have to go through a book this thick and learn all this stupid theory. It's ridiculous. You're never going to learn all that shit. I don't know that stuff. I know just enough to be able to navigate my way through this thing, and that's it, you know? And so you don't have to get into all this complicated stuff. And if you go on YouTube, there's only about 5 guys on YouTube that have any experience being a professional musician. Uncle Larry, Jed Hughes, Jack Roosh, maybe myself. I'm not going to throw myself into that category, but you know, and here's why. A lot of these people on social media and YouTube that are editing everything and fixing everything and doing everything perfectly, they started with social media, and now they need to build 35 years of experience on top of that. We started with 35 years of experience and sprinkled social media on top of that. So there's experience there. So all these people that are trying to sell, those guys on YouTube that are links below and all this flashy bullshit, they're trying to sell you something, and they're trying to sell you, you know, their new way of thinking that they've figured this out, because that's the only way that they can make a living is on YouTube, because they're not out there in the trenches in a place like Nashville getting their ass kicked for 35 years by the greatest musicians on the planet. And learning every single day. I mean, I've been here for 25 years, and I've had the greatest week in my life the past week, because I keep, you know, you're just pummeled by these incredible musicians on a daily basis. And if you're paying attention, you can't not get better. And so I don't recommend, and I teach a lot of these guys that are in high finance, and they're retired CEOs, and they've built these incredible empires. One of them owns Electronic Arts, which is the second largest tech company in the world. And he's one of my students. And these guys are like fucking Godzilla businessmen, but they're so analytical that they try to learn the guitar in the same way that they're looking at a spreadsheet. Guess what? That's not going to work. You got to feel something, and you have to use your ears. And so that's what all this comes down to. So as far as a practice regimen, the best thing you can do is pick up this guitar and start playing something. The guys that have the most time to play this guitar are the ones that are going to see the most progress. If you've got a family and you've got a big career and you can only spend an hour a week on the guitar, that's about what you're going to get out of it. But that's okay, because I'm not here to make anybody feel insignificant on the guitar, because I like to be kind of a realist. I'm not here to say that, like, oh my God, you guys, you know, you got a lot of work to do. It's like, man, you guys, I'm okay at the guitar. You're great at what you do. Whatever you do, I'm sure you're really great at it. This guy back here owns some company. I'm sure he's crushing it. I don't have any idea who you are, but I'm just making shit up. But you know what I'm saying? So everybody has their thing that they do. So it's not my job to come in here and just tell everybody that, like, well, man, well, we're the guitar players, and like, you guys are here learning from us. It's like, no, man, I'm going to give you some perspective on what I've learned in my career, which is being a guitar player. And so, you know, I'm lucky to be able to have done that, because that's what I love to do. And if you love to be a mountain biker, then I hope that you're able to make a living being a mountain biker, because what the fuck else is there in life? It's a waste of time if you're not doing something that you really enjoy. So I recommend quitting your job. I would say quit school and quit your job. You know? Okay, so I hope that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm from Alabama, man. The public school system sucked, and so I got out of that as fast as I possibly could. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can you put that on there? I have no idea where. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Golden.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, thanks. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's like, you know, everybody has their career and their thing, and so I'm just trying to shed a little bit of light on a couple things. And so, are there any? Let's take a couple questions just to spark some conversation, and then I'm going to get into some playing. Of course, we're going to get into the guitar. I'm not going to talk all day, but is there any other? Okay, let's go.
I'd like to learn. I kind of started learning the caged, not for better word,
Yeah.
system too, which I totally groove on.
Yeah,
What I
yeah,
have a hard time doing is connecting, transitioning from one to the other.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
tying them together.
Right.
So you can go east-west instead of just north and south.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So don't let me forget that, because as soon as we get over to the other side of this, I'm going to get into exactly. I think I'm going to start with the cage system, because that is what changed my life when I was a kid. And we're going to do a crash course on all that.
I guess my issue is we spend so much time trying to learn the guitar that I would love to know when, how to get to that transition point when you stop thinking so much and just playing.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is you just got to, you got to kind of get out of your mind and not worry about making a mistake. You know, this whole thing about making mistakes and playing wrong notes, man. Dude, I was playing last night. I was so fucking exhausted at my gig last night. I couldn't hardly see straight. And so this song that I've been playing for like 15 years that I made up, I was soloing. And it solos over B minor, F sharp minor, G major 7, kind of ish, G, to E minor, or, and then back to B minor. So the whole solo section of this song is. That's the whole thing. It's 4 chords. I've played this song for 15 years. Dude, I hit a wrong note and got sideways, and I couldn't recover. I played more wrong notes, and that's 1.5 minutes than I've played in the past 15 years. I just looked at the drummer and started laughing. I was like, man, I said, I am completely sideways, and I can't get back. I was so tired, man. I couldn't fucking play anything. And some of you guys were there last night. You probably heard that. And then Jordan goes, man, it sounded like you were just going for something different. I was like, oh yeah, it was different, all right. I was like, what key is my song in? Anyway, so what was the question?
About getting out of here.
Okay, we're gonna get there. So, but for that, I mean, I made horrifying mistakes last night. And I thank God I don't think anybody was videotaping anything, but I kind of don't care, really. I mean,
are you out of that by the next song?
now if I was drinking a lot and I made a bunch of mistakes like that, then I'd feel terrible. But to be sober and playing and make a lot of mistakes, they're just honest mistakes. We're tired, man. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to beat myself over that. But if you're getting too high or too drunk, or you have a dad band and it's your excuse to go get drunk, that's fine. But if you make a bunch of mistakes because you've had too much to drink, then you're kind of being disrespectful to the art form at that point. You know what I mean? So if you have some honest mistakes and you're just trying something, totally fine. But if you're fucked up, that's not cool. But to your point is you just got to kind of realize that, man, nobody's going to get hurt on that thing. You're not doing this surgery to where it's like, oh, oops, I just killed this person. No, you're not going to. You could hit
I actually am a surgeon.
See, it's got to say. See what I mean? So, yeah. So I mean, that's kind of like, I mean, that's just part of it. But you just kind of gotta try to find a way to realize that it's really about this. If I'm sitting down here and I just go, if I do this. Well, that doesn't mean a whole lot. But if I put a little bass note in there, and I'm not talking about having like a lot of independent right hand finger picking. You don't have to learn all this crazy Chet Atkins bass note shit. I don't know any of that. But if you just kind of approach it as a Delta blues style and you just start clawing at the guitar. I'm using my first and finger, my thumb. I'm not doing anything that requires a lot of independent movement. I'm just kind of adding the bass note. So then if I add this to that. that's a style of kind of like blues you've heard your whole life. But if I just did this, there's not really a whole lot of rhythm there. But if I add the bass note and just kind of like pinch together, you know, just to keep the rhythm going, well, then it starts sounding more like music. You've established like some sort of a groove, you know. So just doing that is, you know, you could play down here in the first 4 frets for the rest of your life and you can still make music. It's just about having a little bit of rhythm and some sort of phrasing where, of course, we'll get into like, okay, well, the major scale. Okay, how do I get off the major scale? I know the major scale. It just keeps doing this. How do I get off of this hamster wheel of playing the major scale? Well, you have to know where to stop. There's whatever musical situation you're in, there's maybe I hate to say anything that revolves around any kind of a rule, because there are no rules, but there are things that sound good and are things that aren't going to sound as good. So some of those things you kind of got to wrap your head around. But another big part of this is I see a lot of guys, you know, you pick up the guitar, you start noodling around, you don't really know where you're at. There's no tonal center. You might be playing a pentatonic, but then you slide out of position and you're in a different key and you don't even know it. And so it really comes down to listening. I mean, you know, I'd rather hear somebody with one string that can hear a melody versus somebody that can play a bunch of garbage and that's not saying anything. It's like I said, it comes back to you. As soon as you pick up this guitar and you make a sound, you should be communicating something from yourself out into the world, you know? And so you just got to be careful. I mean, you know, this guitar is only going to say what you tell it to do. And without a chord or some sort of tonal center to get yourself started with, all you have is this. And so until I go, okay, well, now you got an A7. It's like, okay, well, now you've given me some information. You've got a topic to talk about. Okay, well, that's some information. Okay, well, I don't know what's coming next, but I know that's that. And if you want to play something over that, you kind of have to know a little bit of where you're at. So I was stuck down here playing these bluegrass songs, trying to figure out how to go from the 1 chord to the 4 chord for 6 years when I was a little kid. And then I watched this video. And the guy was saying that he said, if you want to open up the guitar fingerboard up the neck, you have to know it's all about chords. So if you're trying to play lead guitar and you don't know the chord, where your chords are up the fingerboard, and you can see the notes that make up these 5 chord shapes, like the constellations, you're adding 20 years to your work. I mean, you know, I can simplify this for you really quick. But like I said earlier, you got to plan the work and work the plan. So the plan is, and I'm not trying to sell you anything. These guys have already paid me. You know, I'm just here to share what worked for me, and this is what worked. And everybody else that I talk to that you guys love that can really play something, it thinks about this the same way. And the guys that sound like they're thinking too much are the ones that are. They are. They're overthinking this shit. So if you go to, if you have heard of the caged system, which all of you have, I don't like that word because it sounds like something new. And here's the bottom line is, as soon as somebody tuned this guitar the way it's tuned right now, those fundamentals were in place. It's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. As long as you tune this guitar, you know, E, B, G, D, A, E, then these fundamentals are here to stay for eternity. And so this guy showed me, he goes, look, on the video, he said, you have to learn these chord shapes and the information around those chords. And so here's the problem. Everybody thinks, well, chords are for rhythm and lead is lead. Well, that's completely wrong in a way. Yes, chords, yeah, if you want to do that, yeah, that's a chord, that's rhythm, this is rhythm. This is rhythm. Okay, well, those are chords, of course. But what the secret is connecting and really seeing how the chords are directly related to everything that you want to be able to play on the guitar. So we're going to get into this a lot because this is the biggest thing that I think is going to help you see some, you know, if there was a shortcut, this is it. Let's just say that. And it's not a cheap one. It's a real one. And so, again, he's like, okay, you got to learn the chord shapes. These cowboy chords down here, these open position chords. If I play it, now a lot of you guys know this already, but some of you might not. So I'm going to really try to simplify this to where you really understand this by the end of the day, because this is of huge value. So if I play this open E chord, well, you can see that nut right there, that's the end. Okay, well, if I was playing that E chord and there was another fret here, I'd have to play that, which you can see is an F shape, right? Again, man, I'm going back to the beginning here because I think this is so important. So if I take this E shape and I want to play an F chord, I have to now slide that up, and now I have to bar that with my first finger, because now that becomes the nut. It's like a capo, right? I know a lot of you guys know this already. So now if I want to play an F sharp, I just move it up. There's G, there's A flat, there's A, there's B flat, there's B, there's C. Okay, well, same with all these shapes. If I'm playing this C shape, C chord, if I want to play D flat, I now have to bar that chord. Now, a little secret here is when you're barring something, if your fingers are fretting a note in front of your first finger, you don't have to bar that note. It's already being taken care of. So don't create more work for yourself, you know. Just don't forget, like anything above the first finger, you don't need to worry about, like this A string and that D string and the B string. Those are already covered. All I'm doing here is barring the E and the G string. So that gives me the C. So if I want to play a D chord in the C shape, that's going to be right there. And that's where the cage system gets a little confusing, because people are going, well, it's C-A-G-E-D, but I'm playing in a different key, and I think it's just confusing the shit out of people. So I call it the chord inversions. It's your 5 chord inversions up the fingerboard. And so if you take the word caged and you looped it 3 times, no matter where you start in that sequence, that pattern is going to continue. So the only way that caged makes any sense is if you start in C. So it's kind of like, okay, man, somebody came up with some slick pattern that they thought worked, and maybe it makes sense to some people, but personally, man, I just don't think I don't think the cage system is a great thing to call it, you know? It's just your chord inversions. It's the 5 chord shapes up the neck. Okay, so the beauty of that is if you learn these 5 shapes, okay, let's just do C. C shape, then you're going to move to the A-shaped C chord. See how this could be confusing if you are really a beginner? And you're like, well, you're saying the A shape, but it's a C chord. I'm confused. Okay, well, that's fine. But that's what it is. The C, then the A-shaped C chord, then that is going to transition into the G-shaped C chord. Okay. Nobody is ever going to play this chord in their life, ever. Nobody. That's ridiculous. There's no way you're ever going to play this chord. But that's what it is. You need to be able to see that, though. You need to be able to see that those notes are making up the constellation of that chord, because there's so much cool guitar shit in the G shape, regardless of the fact that you're not going to play that big giant chord. But you're going to use this part, and you might use that part every once in a while. But there's a lot of cool guitar stuff in that G shape. So it's not about having your fingers bound to these big giant shapes all the time, but you have to be able to see them like you could see the Big Dipper, you know? And so until you can do that, you're always going to be lost. And I'm just telling you the truth. I see it every day. Hey, do you know your chord shapes? Yeah, I know them. Okay, well, how about this? You don't know them. You can't just play them one time and think you know them. You got to spend a lot of time learning these shapes, because I'm going to show you why in just a minute. But so you go C shape, A shape, G shape, E shape, D shape, and here's another trick. You're never going to play the D shape like this. That is never going to happen. You're going to play it like this, and you're going to put the third on the bottom like that. The bottom means the low strings. That doesn't mean the bottom of the fingerboard. The bottom means the low tonality of the instrument. So when you say that note's on the bottom, that doesn't mean it's down here. That's the top. Don't ask me why. I know. Top meaning high end, bottom meaning bass notes, low strings, right? It's kind of confusing because I think the same way. I'm like, oh yeah, at the top, that's up here. But so there's that shape, and then you're back to square one at the 12th fret, the C shape, right? Okay, this is all going to get a lot more interesting here in a minute, but I'm just showing you the fundamentals. Dude, this is 99.9% of all the people on the planet are not spending the time to learn what I'm telling you right now, because they think chords are for rhythm and lead is for lead. Scales don't mean shit if there's not a chord underneath it. That's why I guarantee you there's somebody here that's going to play a pentatonic and be off in some other universe without even knowing what key they're in. And because there's no tonal center. You have to have a tonal center. And so, these things are just extremely important. So, okay, now let me tell you this. So now, another trick to these chord shapes. I was going to tell you. So once you learn the 5 shapes in one key, you really know them everywhere. That's the one thing that you're like, okay, well at least that's happening. It's not like every key there's a new 5 shapes. So if I'm in C, here's my C shape. Here's my second inversion. Here's my G shape. All those shapes contain the same notes. So the guitar repeats itself all the way up the fingerboard. It's not laid out like a piano where everything's just linear. There's all this shit going on everywhere. So if I go to G, now the same pattern is intact. I'm just starting with the G, with the open G. Now the next shape is going to be the E shape. Now the D shape. Now the C shape, A shape, back to the G shape. If I'm starting in D, the next one's going to be the C shape, A shape, G shape. You can see E, D shape, C shape, A shape, G shape, right? So you can see how this pattern, it's all the same. It's just you're starting on a different, chord. And then, so what happens there is the value of this and where it really starts becoming applicable to making music and navigating your way around the fingerboard and knowing what you're doing is, here's my G, here's my C, here's my D, here's my G. Here's my G, here's my C, here's my D, here's my G. Here's my G, C, D, G. G, C, D, G. So once you know that, okay, well, now I'm starting to figure this out. Here's my G, I know my 4's there. Here's my 5, could be there. I've got options. I'm going to break these triads down for you in a minute so you can see how that works. But so that's a little bit of where this is going. And so then, another big part of this is breaking these things down into triads, which means a proper major chord, 1, 3, 5. If you don't know how to find the 1, 3, 5, those are based on the degrees of the scale. Play the major scale starting on the root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1 is 8. That's octave. That's an octave. So then I start on 1 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1. That's your major scale. You got to know the major scale in your ear. So if you hit a wrong note, you're going to be able to adjust it. But if you're ever in question of where the flat 7 or what are people talking about? Where's the third? Well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, right? Okay, that's your major scale. You can find this stuff. It's like teaching a guy how to fish rather than give him a fish. I'm not going to sit up here and show you a bunch of licks because you're not going to know where they came from. So you got to know where they come from. And this is how you do it. So another thing about these chords, 2 really important things. Now, I would write this down or record it or something, but to me, the number one most important thing about these chord inversions is the playing in the right hand position. So if you're trying to play something out of the D shape, whether you know it or not, and your hand's not lined up right, your fingers aren't going to fall where they're supposed to. If I'm playing in the D shape, and I know my house analogy, which I'm about to get to, then your fingers are going to fall almost without you having to think about it, because each finger at that point is going to have a fret. Okay, here's an example. And I'm telling you, this is going to get good. So here's your E chord C shape, right? Watch my left hand. Watch this. Here's the chord. I'm going to play the major scale, and my hand's barely going to move out of this position. Okay, that's my third. I'm playing all the notes. You don't always get a book-matched root note on these chords. You'll get one on the E shape, and you'll get one on the G shape, but every other chord, you're going to have thirds, and it's not always going to line up to be root on the E strings, right? So with this C shape, your third is down here, because there's my D shape, there's my C shape. Until you know these chord shapes, none of this is going to make sense. So the biggest homework assignment is to learn these 5 chord shapes. I don't care if you want to sound like Eddie Van Halen, you got to know these chord shapes. So that's where that's coming from. So you can see, you know, that's a very efficient. Now, if I want to play the 1, the 4, and the 5 out of this position, you know, that's just 1, 4, 5. I'm not leaving that position. If I want to do the same thing in the A position, it's right here. It's right there. If I want to do it out of the G position, or whatever. But so that's the G position. So you can see, I'm just trying to make a point here that the hand position is absolutely crucial. So there's that. Okay, now another thing about the cage system, I'm just going to call it that because I can't, if you can't beat them, join them, man. So not every chord position on this fingerboard is going to have a proper triad on all 3 strings. Okay, so this is my point. Here's a G bar chord. You get a proper triad right here. This is a 1, 5, and a 3. That's a proper triad. That means that's a major chord. It's spelling out that that's a major chord. If I just played the root and the 5th and the root, there's no third defining that chord. So I don't know if that's major or minor until I hear how it's used in a song or against another melody or something like that, right? So if I play this triad here, then I play this triad here on the, now I'm moving to the D, G, and B string. That's a proper triad. So you can see, I'm taking this big giant chord now, and I'm going to start reducing it down to its smallest parts over and over and over until you can see that clearly. So that's a triad. Now, if you can see this, as I move to the next group of 3 strings, the D, G, and the B string now, the 5th from the previous triad and the 3rd from the previous triad are still intact. But now the root is going to be shifted to the D string. So now I've got a proper triad, but it's a different inversion of it. So instead of this one, now it's this. Okay? It's all, you can see it's all coming from that chord. It all lives inside there super clearly.
You said not every position is going to have a proper triad on each string set, or sometimes just like 1, 5, 1.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I'm going to show you every shape in just a second. Watch. I'll show you. So then look. So then what I'm saying is they're connected, and one's picking up where the other one left off. So if I'm here now that's my root, that's my 3rd, and that's my 5th. Now if I go to the next triad on the A, D, and G string, now that's my 3rd, that's my root, and my fifth is now on the A string. And then ultimately the full chord, the root would be on the bass. There's your big G bar chord. So in this shape, I've got 1, 2, 3 proper triads. But this, that's a power chord. That's just a 1, a 5, and a 1, right? Because there's no third defining that major. Okay, well, okay, now watch this. When I go to the D shape, I'm gonna go every shape. So when I go to the D shape, here's another trick. Okay, here's the open G chord. These chords are, one's picking up where the last one left off. So you can see, this is just a little side thing here. So that G chord, the bass note is right there on the low E string. All I'm doing is I'm connecting, I'm gonna put my first finger on that bass note, and then this chord is gonna take shape. So this is being replaced by the inversion, which is here. Those are the same notes, right? There's gonna be all kinds of repeating going on in these chord shapes. And this is gonna really elevate here in just a second, but you gotta get this. So that's that. Now, watch this. So these two notes here, the root and the fifth that are the farthest up this way, those are going to be replaced by my first finger, and then these two notes, or what, let's see. Okay, well, at least these two are going here. So that's from here. First finger is going to take care of those two, which were previously here. Everybody can see that, I'm sure. Now that's going to create the D shape. Well, that whole chord, B string, G string, D string, and A string, there's not a third in any of that. That's all a power chord. Very clean and nice. But until I add the third on the top, the bottom, that's now a proper major chord. I've got the third there. Because this is a triad. That's a proper triad. So in order for this to become a proper triad, I gotta steal that third from that chord. That's not really that important. Here's your third down here. But like I said, if I play that D shape like that, I'm not in that shape anymore. I've shifted up to, now I'm in the C shape. So if I play the D shape here, in order to get that third on the bottom, you'd have to play this, and that's just not ever gonna happen. That's a very uncomfortable, useless way to do this. So I'm playing it like that. That's how we play it.
You're leaving your high E out of it.
Leaving the high E out of it, yeah. You could do something like that, but nobody's gonna do that because it's so uncomfortable, right? So that becomes your D shape. Now you can see my root and my fifth right there. I'm gonna replace that with my first and second finger. Now that puts me on this plane to be able to create the C shape. You can see how that's all connected. Okay, the C shape is the only shape that has a proper triad on all sets of 3 strings. You've got one here, 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 and here. Okay, in the D shape, going back, the only triad is, if you really look at this in it completely, it's here and here. All this is just a repeating set of 1s and 5s, right? Okay, so then the C shape has a proper triad on all 3 strings. Go to the A shape, you can see there's my bass note. I'm gonna put my first finger there. This now becomes the same notes on another set of strings. So a musical application of that idea would be if I did this. Okay. It's the same lick all over the fingerboard. So if you find a lick somewhere, find where the starting note is and learn it everywhere on the fingerboard. I mean, those little things like that are huge, you know. Learn a bunch of TV themes, or like Happy Birthday, or Take Me Out to the Ball Game, or the National Anthem, or, you know, or whatever. I mean, the reason why is because you'll learn about intervals with melodies, and if one of those notes was wrong, you're going to know it. So your ear might not pick up on me telling you like, okay, you need to learn this. Okay, well, that's stupid. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. It just sounds like a bunch of wrong notes until you play it in a situation that makes sense. But I guarantee you, I don't care how bad your ears are, if I played Happy Birthday and hit a wrong note, every fucking one of you in here would know it. So you got to start there, you know, and like, don't try to learn a bunch of shit that's really complicated because some dude in your hometown music store told you needed to. Don't listen to that guy. Learn some easy shit to where your ear can really develop. You know, if Robin Ford was in here and he told me some scale that I need to learn, well, guess what? At that point, I'm starting from scratch because I can't hear that. I don't know what he's talking about. It just sounds like a bunch of wrong notes until your ear develops to the point of where it makes sense, right? So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you need to learn your diminished half whole tone scale and all this other stuff that you're probably never going to use, you know? Okay, so this is where this gets interesting. And if you really pay attention to this, it will help you. And so there's 4 sounds that we really need to be aware of and to be able to navigate through music. And it's not anything crazy. Most of you have heard these sounds before. Some of you might not be able to tell the difference between them, and you need to be able to tell the difference between them. So here's a G major chord. Here's a G minor chord. Here's a G major 7 chord. You know? Here's a G dominant 7 chord. Right? So the point of this is, yes, you got to train your ear. If you can't tell the difference, there's only one note changing in all those chords to make those up. Okay, so here's where this gets good. So in all those triads that I just showed you, in all those chords, every proper triad, that doesn't mean 3 strings. That means 3 strings with a 1-3-5 that makes up a major chord. It has to be a 1-3-5. That's a proper major triad. Again, that's 3 notes, but it's a 1 and a 5 and a 1. There's no third defining what that chord is. That changes everything. That's everything. So here's a proper G triad on the G, B, and E string out of this chord. If I drop the root down a half step, and you got to really pay attention because every other note in that triad has to stay the same. So your fingering is going to accommodate these changes, but you're only changing one note if you really look at this. So when I take this shape and I drop the root down a half step, that lets me access a major 7 sound. And that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can see that note of that scale, the natural 7 is the note that changes that makes a major chord sound like a major 7. So this is why chords and lead guitar are directly connected. If somebody's playing a major 7 chord in a song and I don't know what to play over it, well, this is how you learn how to do that, because I'm needing to emphasize the note in the chord that changes that makes the sound that you're hearing. I need to be able to play those same notes along with that chord, because I mean, that's about as caveman approach as you could get, you know. Pentatonics don't work over everything, and we're going to get to that in a minute too, because that's another hot topic. So when I drop that root down a half step, that lets me access a major 7 sound. If I drop that root down a whole step, that lets me access a dominant 7 sound. If I drop the third down a half step, I get a minor. So right there, to go from, and now let me show you another great trick here. I mean, this is where the homework really starts. So if I want to play, so this is something you got to write down. If you got a piece of paper, this is where you start writing something down. This is going to be a little bit of this is going to take a minute, but it's really going to be worth it. Okay, so this is the sequence that you really need to work on this stuff. So if there was anything that I was going to practice in any sort of regimented way or any kind of sequence, this is exactly what it is. And here's where you gotta plan the work and work the plan. If you do this, it's gonna work. But if you dabble in this for a minute and then you chase some other guy on YouTube telling you need to do this or that, it's not gonna work. You're gonna do that. Here's your true north, is this way. If you start going way over here and then back over here to chase some other dipshit on YouTube that's trying to tell you some bullshit that's never gonna work, that's never gonna work. I'm telling you guys, this is what works. And so if you play a chord, the chord is the concrete slab of the house. This is the concrete slab. Without the chord, like I said, you have nothing. So here's the chord, the concrete slab. The first level of framework, the 2x4 framing, is the arpeggio. And you want to be in the proper hand position for all 5 of these chord shapes. And here's a proper arpeggio. Here's my shape. Here's my hand position. I'm going to start with my second finger because I have to steal this third from the open shape. Otherwise, I'd have to jump way up here. That's going to throw me out of my hand position. And I'm going to be screwed at that point. So here's the chord. First level of framework, the 2x4s, is the arpeggio. And that's the notes of the chord played by themselves. And that sounds just like this. Okay, now I'm going to add to this because you're probably thinking, okay, this is just another exercise. I'm going to tell you this right now. Not one fundamental that I will talk about all day today are we ever departing from. I'm using this shit every single day. I'm using arpeggios, I'm using pentatonics, I'm using the major scale, I'm using, any of this stuff we're using. I'm not teaching you anything that you're not going to use because that's what you get from somebody that's been playing guitar for a living for 35 years. I'm not saying myself. I'm saying Jack Roosh that's going to come here tomorrow. He's going to tell you the same shit I'm telling you right now. I guarantee it. And if Uncle Larry was here, he would tell you, dude, it's all about chords. It's all about chords. And so, again, so this is the foundation's the chord. The first level of framework is the arpeggio. Again. Okay, the next level of framework, the sheetrock, is the pentatonic. And you can see everything is built in this sequence. All these notes from the chord are going to be in the arpeggio. All the notes from the arpeggio are going to be in the pentatonic. All the notes from the pentatonic are going to be in the major scale. And then whatever you do after that is your own thing. But so if I'm playing the pentatonic, I'm just adding the second and the sixth to the arpeggio. Now, you don't really need to worry about that because this is what it is. I mean, here's the sound. The whole thing. There's your G major pentatonic. Okay, now the next level of framework, the wallpaper, is the major scale. So it's this framework, fundamental, you can't put two by fours up until you have a concrete slab. You can't put sheetrock on 2x4s if they're not there. You can't put wallpaper on 2x4s. You got to have some sheetrock. You can't hang art on a wall until you have some wallpaper. So it's a direct sequential thing. You have to do it in this sequence. That's the only rule that you'll ever hear from me. I mean, I don't care if you want to eat mushrooms and go run naked through the woods, go do that. But if you're going to learn the guitar, you got to do this part, right?
Write that down too.
Yeah, put that down. So here's the thing. So then you've got the chords, the arpeggio, the pentatonic. Now you've got the major scale, and that sounds just like this. Do, re, mi. You all know that, right? So if you hit a wrong note, you're going to know it. So that's the first octave. Here's the second octave. You see how my hand is staying it's very efficient. I'm not saying I've figured anything out, but that's the chord shape. You gotta stay, it's about that shape and that position. Again, here's the major scale. I'm not darting down here or darting down here. Here's another trick. If you're trying to find a note and you're having to jump more than a couple frets up or down, it's gonna be on one of these other strings. Now, if you're all the way down here on the high E string and you need to go up, well, yeah, then you gotta go up. But if you're down here on like the D string and you're trying to play if you're in the G shape and you're trying to play that note, it needs to be right there. You don't go up here, because now you're out of position and you're gonna be stuck. And if anything ever comes up where there's any tempo involved, or you're trying to play something in time, you're toast.
I know both these things are important, but when you're playing chords, arpeggios, pentatonic, when are you thinking of the note names? When are you thinking of the intervals related to the tonic?
Why am I not thinking of those?
No, when are you like switching back and forth between, all right, I need to think of the note names for this. All right, it's more important to think of the intervals for this.
Well, that's a good question. So I don't really know my notes on the fingerboard everywhere. You know, I mean, I know that, you know, I know that that's an F sharp, and I know that's a G, and I know that's an A, and that's a B, and that's a C. But if you pointed to some of these notes up here, I mean, I'd have to stop and think about it. I don't know. Like Jack Pearson has all the notes memorized on the fingerboard. He knows every single note on every single string on all these frets. He knows what notes those are. Now, if you point to that note, man, that's going to take me a second. I'm going to have to try to figure it out and go, okay, well, that's an E flat or whatever it is. Because I've played by ear for so long, and these positions, and I'm not. It's tricky to say that though, because I'm not playing relying on the positions. I am, but that's a fundamental that I got out of the way a long time ago. I'm still working on a lot of stuff, which we'll get into that. But you know, I've got those fundamentals out of the way to a point where I don't really have to think about it a whole lot anymore. I can try to focus on playing something that's worth a shit, hopefully, but I don't really know the names I'm not thinking about the note names, because think about it like this. If you're talking to somebody and you had to be thinking about every letter of every word while you're talking to them, you wouldn't be able to say anything. And so it's like you got the alphabet, you're putting these words together, you're putting sentences together, and you're trying to tell somebody something that means something. That's where I come back to the language analogy. It's like, I'm not really worried about, when you're talking to somebody, I'm not thinking about every letter that's in the words that you're using, you know, because you wouldn't be able, you got that out of the way when you were a little kid. When you were a little kid, you got that out of the way. And so these fundamentals have to be like that. You got to get these out of the way before you can say something that makes sense, because if you don't, you're going to be fumbling around with your words, and it's like somebody that's terrified of public speaking. They're going to get up and clam up. Well, same thing's going to happen on the guitar if you don't have this shit under your belt. And so you have to, if you want to get better. Now that's what all this comes down to. Again, I'm not here to tell you that that somebody's better at the guitar than you are. That's not why we're here. Like I said, you guys all have careers, and everybody's great at what they do, and everybody's respective line of work or whatever they like to do. But since I'm being paid to come here and try to shed a little bit of light on some things that work and some things that I've learned in my life on the guitar, that's what I'm here to do. So, you know, I'm not trying to sell you a new blender. I'm telling you that, you know, when I was stuck down here trying to play fiddle tunes, and I didn't know how to solo up the fingerboard until I learned these shapes. And so the shapes, to his point, the shapes mean more to me I just want to access the sounds I want to access. I'm not worried about, does an A flat work over a G or whatever. I don't know any of that stuff, man, because guess what? It's fucking confusing. And it doesn't sound like music. And the people that play thinking about math problems in their head, they sound like it, and it's not fun to listen to. They're not taking any chances. And guess what? I'm playing shit in the wrong key half the time if you want to ask some Berkeley graduate. But guess what? When you live in Nashville, they don't give a shit if you went to music school or not. All they want to know is this guy going to be able to play something that sounds good? Well, I'm going to show you an example of that in just a second, to where if somebody teaches you a minor scale, I take one of those notes out of it, because guess what? It sounds like shit most of the time. And so I think theory was created back before popular music was invented. And so if somebody's doing this, they'll say, that note sucks in that application. So if I'm playing an A minor, if I'm in the key of C and it goes to the 6 minor, if I play, this is what that note sounds like in the chord. I don't know about you guys, that doesn't sound good to me. So this is the scale that they teach you. That's the note that you're going to learn if you go to music school and they tell you you're playing a minor scale. They're going to put that F note in there. That note sucks in a minor chord. Because you hear guys do this all the time. Without even thinking about it, they do this. Fucking hate that lick. Don't ever play that. It's so stupid. Because I would much rather hear this chord, right? Add the 2 to the minor. It's something you can actually use. So here, watch. Okay, if I'm playing that. Okay, that's a nice minor chord. So what I like to do is take the minor pentatonic, which sounds very stiff and like an exercise, has its place, but I'm going to add that second degree to the minor pentatonic and take that sharp 5 or whatever they're calling it out of there. And then you end up with this. You know? So I like the way that sounds. It's more melodic and it's not as harsh. That note is, just because it's there in this book doesn't mean that you can use it all the time. So you have to really trust your ear. So I learned a lot from that Danny Gatton video that he came out with a long time ago. I just bought 4 copies of the DVD on Amazon because I actually found it finally. Now I got to find a DVD player. But I learned so much from that video because he's a hillbilly like me, and he basically said, I'm playing in the wrong key a lot of times. Well, he's kind of kidding, but I'm going to get to all that too today, where basically you're taking a chord, and if you know some of these tricks that I'll show you, they're not tricks, but they're just ideas. But, you know, there's a lot of stuff. So if you think that you're never going to use the major 7 sound, or you go, I don't like a major 7 sound, it sounds like Steely Dan, or it sounds, you know, it's too pretty, or it's not aggressive enough, or whatever reason you don't like the major 7 sound, which is this. Okay, well, even if you don't like that sound, it still has its place, because if I play, and this is getting way ahead of the ball game, but this is like where we're going for later today, is if I'm playing an A7, and we got to get to why the pentatonic doesn't work over everything too, because I've heard that a million times. Well, I learned the minor pentatonic. I can use that over everything, right? No, you can't. That's like Anthony Bourdain learning how to cook an omelet, you know, or whatever. It's like, you know, you got the pentatonic. That's that's a starting place. You know, we got to be able to really access these 4 different sounds that I'm talking about. I'm getting off the subject, but if you play it, if I was to play an A, here's a perfect example of this. If I'm playing an A7, I can play ideas out of E minor and G major 7 over that A7 because they're all the same notes as this, which is I call it the A dominant 7 scale because I don't think modes are good either. And so I don't recommend learning modes because I think modes are exactly what the word means. You're in a mode and then you're in this mode. Well, if the chords are changing, you need to be thinking about the chords changing in the song and the key that you're in, not some mode, because the mode is going to take you down the wrong road. And so I don't agree with the whole modal thing. I mean, and Rick Beate goes, yeah, Guthrie says he doesn't use modes and then immediately starts playing in modes. I was like, well, I'm not thinking like that, though. I'm not thinking about it. I mean, yeah, of course, whatever any of you guys play today, I can say, oh, yeah, that's that, and that's that, and that's that. But if you're not thinking that way, that's a whole different ballgame. So I'm thinking about playing over the chords that are happening in a song. And what that means is you got to be hearing these changes coming ahead of time because that's going to affect what you're playing in the very moment. And so I'm not saying you have to outline every single chord of every single song literally because that's going to start sounding, that's not going to sound right all the time. And so if the song is really simple, you can play simple. But if there's a lot of changes happening, you have to honor those chord changes. We're going to get to some cool shit, but for right now, going back to this triad thing where you're moving the root, you know, the root goes down a half step, makes a major 7, root goes down a whole step, dominant 7, third goes down a half step, makes a minor. So if I want to start outlining those chords, if I play a G major, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to play root 3rd, 5th, root, right? Okay, well you can see if this goes to a major 7, back to the triad, that root note is dropping down in that chord, that root is dropping down a half step. So the way I'm going to access major 7 is I'm going to play root 3rd, 5th. So the same 3 notes are already, it's the same 3 notes. So we're starting the same hand position, same first 3 notes, root 3rd, 5th, natural 7. So right there, you just change that one note. You're already playing over a major 7 chord. So it's that simple. So if I play a dominant 7, all that's happening is, you know, if you play it like that, that's a 7. So you're seeing, there's your flat 7. So if you really get inside this and look at it, what you have to do, you got to dissect these chords as much as you can. That flat 7 right there on the D string, now I'm going to it's still a dominant chord because it's got the major 3rd. So I'm going to play the first 3 notes like I did, root 3rd, 5th, flat 7. So now I'm immediately accessing the dominant 7 chord. But if you don't play that note and somebody's playing a dominant 7 chord, or you want to insinuate a dominant 7 chord, if you don't know that little rule, then it's not going to work. You're going to be going, well, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Well, you can see that the chord is just such a foundation to build all this stuff on. It's going to really, really help make things easier, and it's going to start making sense if you just think about this a little bit. And I'm not saying you have to relearn how to play the guitar just because you had a guitar workshop, but you need to keep doing what you're doing, but add a little bit of this stuff in it and just think about what you're doing a little bit more. And try to, if you're playing something, go, okay, well, what key am I in? How is that relating to one of these shapes? What shape am I in? Like, you just got to start kind of like, you know, quizzing yourself a little bit and using your brains just a little bit on this stuff. But so then if I want to, okay, so then look, we've accessed major 7 and dominant 7 with that same framework and that one chord shape by just moving that one note. You can see it as plain as day if you can follow this method, right? So now the only thing left is minor. And so watch this. The only thing that's going to change is I'm going to go from my root to my flat third. So root, flat 3, 5, 1. So you still have the root and the fifth and the root. I'm just adding the flat third. So right there, you're accessing the minor. You're outlining that minor sound. So you have to emphasize the note in the chord that's changing to give you the sound that you're hearing. So it's pretty simple. So if I was to play, just to give you an example how this works before I move in, I'm going to cover all these shapes, sort of. When I'll be here all day trying to cover all of them, but I'm going to show you a couple different examples. But if this G minor, if I was going to play over G minor to C minor to D7, like it's just a minor blues of some sort, right? Something like that. Or, you know, could be something like that. Any way you want to do it. But here's how you would start outlining those chords. Now that's different than doing this. That's the chord, and that's cool if you want to do that for your, like a rhythm part or something. But if you want to start breaking away from the chordal grip to the actual single note, what's going to translate into your lead guitar playing that everybody wants to be able to do, that's the foundation to start kind of bridging that gap. So to be honest with you, I added the root note. You could start without the, you could just do the 1, 3, 5. Right, so that's G minor, C minor from the A shape, then the D7 from the C shape. Okay, so that's, you know, if I was to try to figure out, okay, well, I made it to there, where's the 7? Well, nah, you know, you don't want to do that because that's going to throw you out of the shape. So it's always going to be, if you're ever questioning where to go, always go back to the chord. If you play the chord, the answer is going to be right in there. That's like your Bible for the guitar, or these chords, man. The answer is in the chord always. We've only lost about 3 people so far. That's normal. They left. That's okay. Okay, so watch how this works. So here's, I don't want to lose anybody here, so you just got to tell me to stop if I'm going too fast, because this is really going to ramp up. So the reason why this gets a little interesting, so if I'm playing a G chord like this, G minor, I love the minor sound. So if I'm playing a G minor, I've got a root, I've got a flat third, and I've got a fifth, right? That's making that sound. Okay, well, I've got one here, I've got one here, I've got one here, and I've got one here. All these minor triads everywhere. Well, each one of those degrees, the root, the flat 3, and the fifth, those all have melodic properties, and they're all ultimately and extremely useful. That's what's being used to play any kind of lead guitar, any kind of melodic music that we want to hear. So watch this. So I'm going to break away from this really, like, you know, kind of basic framework of the 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5 root, right? So now I'm going to play, I already played the root, third, fifth root. So I'm just, you can see what I'm doing. This is an octave. I'm just connecting. And you can see that has a kind of a rhythm to it, you know? Let's see. yeah, that. So yeah. Anyway, not a great example, but this you can see. So three notes would be this. So if I play three notes on the D7, that's just root third fifth. That's fine. But if I add three, it kind of just bookends that little phrase. And then if I add, four notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then on the D7, 1, 2, 3, 4. I get the actual flat 7 on the D7. Okay, this is going somewhere. So if I go here, now I'm going to keep adding notes, and this is going to get more melodic as I start introducing the flat third of each one of these. Now, this is going to take me a second to develop an example, but you'll hear it. So if I do this, so now I'm playing, you know, that's just taking the arpeggio and breaking it down, breaking it down, breaking it down. So if I do this, let's see. Okay, now that sounds like a nice line. There's nothing in that example that's out of whack. I'm not searching for a note that works or playing something that doesn't work. Now, I'm not saying that that's like a genius line, but it's definitely works over all three of those chords. So again, watch. I'm gonna show you exactly what I'm doing. I'm going up the arpeggio. As soon as I hit that note right there, my ear is telling me that the next note is going to be, because, so if I just did this, if I played that D sharp, I actually do know what that note is. If I played that and left the G in the bass, it sounds like shit. But if I do this, so every single note with a chord connected to it, that's when it starts sounding like music. So this doesn't have to be complicated. I'll show you a gazillion examples of how this stuff works melodically, but you really got to look at it. And you got to really look like, you know, if you play almost to the magnitude of, to this extent of being specific, when you're sitting there and you play one or two notes, it's almost like stop yourself and play the chord again. And then try a couple other notes, play the chord again. Try a couple other notes, play the chord. A couple notes, play the chord. Because as soon as you start getting off, you got to come back to the chord, or you're just going to be noodling around. And I've heard it all my life. You got to have a tonal center or a chord progression or something to work with, or you're always going to be just kind of not really saying anything, you know. And so with this example, it's a nice little minor example. Again, I'm going to play this again. So if I go all the way down here, so so right there, that's when the C minor is happening. So that'd be like bo do 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 da ba da. Like there's melody in there without even playing single notes. You just play the chord. Now I did add that the flat 7 right here. If you just took that, watch. Then you break that down to this part. Watch. Okay, up to the high E, high G. So your melody is. I'm just going right down. So here. That's not complicated, but it follows the chords, right? So one more time. So if I go, that's right down C minor, up D7. Okay, well, if I didn't know this, a D dominant 7 arpeggio in the C shape, I'd be completely lost trying to play over that D7 chord, and it wouldn't sound right. Because if you're playing a minor blues, when it comes to the 5 chord, dominant 7, that's not going to work. You got to target. That's a lot, but basically that's this. So I'm going up the arpeggio, back down the arpeggio. If you play like that too much, though, it starts sounding like an exercise, but you got to know the framework. So a lot of times I'll go up the arpeggio, back down the scale, but you got to know the scale. So let's talk about this for just a second. Okay, major chords. You get a major pentatonic. You can use that. You can use that a lot, you know. Just listen to the Allman Brothers, right? So, you know, there's G major. That's G major. Okay. G minor. You get a minor pentatonic. Okay, you can use that all day long. Albert King. Okay, great. But when you play and then major 7 is kind of a subcategory of major because the scale's the same. You got the natural 7, nothing's changing. So really the 3 sounds are major, minor, and dominant 7. Major 7 is a subcategory of major because it's the same scale in my opinion. So there's that. But when you play a dominant 7 chord, you've heard this in blues and funk music, and really what that chord is a transition chord. So if somebody's playing a song like this, okay, all major chords, no embellishments, nothing fancy whatsoever, straight up major chords. Okay. Well, if I'm a steel guitar player or play, you know, whatever I'm playing on that song, when it's going from the G to the C, I can still insinuate with my lead playing or my fills or whatever, or the vocal melody or whatever, you're insinuating a major to the flat 7 to the C chord. So G, so here's another way you could do that. And when you're playing lead around there, you're insinuating this change. So now I would go. Right, okay, so just for an example, play the changes a little quicker. Now you wouldn't want to play that. You might not want the rhythm guitar player playing that really strong C7 every time. Right, but it does, the dominant 7 chord really is a transition chord moving from one chord to the next, because here's why. As soon as I play the G7, that flat 7 is resolving to the major third of the next chord. So if I'm playing G to G7, that F note is pulling your ear to the major third of the next chord. So then if I play C to C7, that B flat note is pulling your ear a half step back to the major third of the one chord. If I play D, the 5 chord, D7. That C note that makes D7, D7, it's always a whole step down from the root, right? Because we know that if we drop the root down a whole step, you get a dominant 7. So we learned that. Now we know it's also resolving a half step down back to the major third of the root chord. So you're always only a half step away from resolving or creating tension to play over these 3-chord blues songs, which of course that morphs into more complicated music, but that's the basics, man. I mean, that if you're going from G to G7 to C, C7 back to G, D, D7 back to G. So if you can get inside and hear and see those changes. So what's really happening there is if I broke all that down into 2 notes, you get this. Here's G, there's G7, there's C. So it's like, root third, flat 7, these little changes. That's a little complicated, but the principle of it's really not. So again, G to G7. So if you just take that into a triad kind of a way, you're looking at G, changing right to the 4 chord. Here's C7. But when all this is in context, of course, it makes sense and it sounds right. Here's D, D7. Resolving right back to the E. So if I'm playing lead guitar and I go, that's where it becomes applicable. So, that's why the chords are so important, because I'm looking at these relationships between, okay, there's G, here's D7. So you can see that inverts. There's your root, there's your third. Then that D7, that becomes that's your major third now, and that's your flat 7. So there's these recurring chord relationships, and one of the biggest ones is the 1 to the 5 to the 1, because there's so much tension there. So if I go, it's pulling your ear strongly to that major third. So when you hear guys, you're gonna go. Let's see. So that'd be D. That's a straight D7, insinuating D7. So this is just the major scale. That's the G major scale, but if you play over D, that's dying for it to go right back. If I do, so I'm just trying to connect these things, but that's a big one. So just because you know the D major scale doesn't mean you can play it over the D chord every time. So if I'm in G, even though the other guitar player in the band might be playing a straight D major chord, I can't do this. Watch, because this is what it would sound like. Well, that's a D major scale. That note, that's not going to work. That's going to sound horrifying. But if I do this over straight D7, because it's the 5 of the G. So if I go, that's all a D dominant 7 scale. That's what you want to play over the 5. every 5 chord for the most part is going to be treated as a dominant 7 chord because you're getting. Then you get into these exercises. So, I mean, I think we're going to have lunch. All right. I can't remember where we left off exactly, but maybe I'll just show you. So, to get you guys playing a little bit of something, so you're just not listening to me up here, you know, cramming all my opinions down your throats all day long. Why don't we get into the key of G? Now let me talk a little bit about something real quick though. Let me cover some of these quick points. I told you about, you know, the chord shapes and the sequence and all that. So I hope you wrote that down because we don't have time to go back and do that. So definitely write that down. And I'm just telling you right now, if you plan that work and you work that plan and you don't get sidetracked by a bunch of social media nonsense, then it's going to work. And those of you that listen to that, you're going to see some results. And those of you that don't, you're on your own. And so you got to plan the work and work the plan. I'm going to tell you exactly where I got that from. So about 3 years ago, I was in New Orleans and I was trying to button my shorts in August in the hotel room. And I was like, I couldn't get my shorts buttoned. And I was like, man, you're getting fat. And it's time to do something about it. I was uncomfortable and I didn't feel good. And my shorts were getting tight. And I was like, that's it, I'm done. And so, of course, I've gained about 15 pounds of that back in the past 3 years. But I got back to Nashville and I called this buddy of mine and I said, man, you gotta put me on some kind of a plan here. I said, I need to lose some weight and get back in shape. He goes, all right. He goes, I'm gonna tell you exactly what to do. He goes, whole fruit in the morning, greens and protein for lunch. At noon, 6 p.m., greens and protein for dinner. No food after 8 o'clock. He goes, it's that simple. 40-minute walk every day. And in under 2 months, I lost 20 pounds, like 21 pounds. And I was like, wow, this really worked. Well, guess what? The first day, I had to email him at 9 o'clock in the morning. You email him email the plan. And then at 9 o'clock at night, you email again and tell them what you've completed or what you haven't completed in that day. So the first day, I emailed him and I said, hey man, I completed everything. I had a smoothie for breakfast. And he called me and he goes, what are you doing? And I went, what do you mean? He goes, you're already fucking with the plan. He goes, that's not the plan. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, I didn't say have a smoothie. He goes, I said whole fruit in the morning. And I was like, oh, well, I had some yogurt in there and some bullshit, you know? And he goes, no, fruit. And so my point of that is, don't take this plan. If you want to get something out of it, if you want to lose 20 pounds in under 2 months and you want it to work, so the next day I stuck to the plan and I didn't eat any bullshit. I ate exactly what he told me to, and I didn't cheat. I didn't even have a crouton. And I drank tequila and vodka through the whole thing. But I drank vodka and soda and tequila and soda. I didn't have any fruit juice. I stuck to the plan. Once he screamed at me and told me that I was messing with the plan, I went back and stuck to the plan. And so that's what worked. And so if you stick to the plan and you work the plan the work the plan, it's going to work. But if you don't do that and you take what I'm telling you and what Jack's going to tell you tomorrow, and you try to come up with your own, trick way of doing it. I got a buddy of mine in New Orleans. Every time I talk to him, he's like, yeah, I came up with a new practice regimen. I go, what are you doing? It's not going to work. You're overthinking this shit. So my point is, if you want to get something out of this, stick to the plan. and it's gonna work. But if you start deviating and chasing every flashy light that comes along, it's not gonna work. Okay, I'm done with that. So we're gonna get into some stuff now, but I would like to tell you a couple quick things, and this will only take a minute, and then we're done, and we'll get into some fun stuff. Gear. Okay, I know that when I go walk around the air park, the old runway in Nashville, I know if I walk around that track twice, it takes about 40 minutes to do that whole loop. 40 minutes to walk around that loop. Now, if I'm sitting at home on my couch and I don't have anything to do and I'm looking at Instagram or YouTube, I can blow through 40 minutes or 2 hours or 3 hours like nothing. And so when you're online looking at some guitar that you think's really nice, or some pedals that you think you need, or some amps that you think you need, not these. I'm not tied to any sales percentages at Carter Vintage Guitars. We're just here in this room, and they are buddies of mine, but I'm not here to sell you anything. So, when you're on your computer late at night and your family's gone to bed and you have your only hour of peace in your life, I'm assuming I don't have any kids or any families because I've devoted my life to this insane fucking business. But my point of that is the time you spend looking at gear on the internet, you could be in your music room playing the guitar that you already have. The guy just asked me out there, he goes, man, which one of these guitars is going to make me a better musician? None of them. It's the one that you have at your house is the one that's going to make you a better musician. It's the time with that guitar in your hands that's going to make you a better musician. This guy over here, I said, man, put on a Tom Petty record, man. You know all those songs. Play along with Tom Petty records. You already know those songs. Just strum along. Make sure you're playing in time and make sure your guitar's do. So that point is, all that your gear needs to be is good enough to where it's not holding you back or distracting you from playing. So, man, my guitar needs to go to the emergency room bad. It's got some stuff going on. But, if you have a note that you hear that's dead or buzzing or fretting out or whatever it is, and it's holding you back, then you need to get that fixed. But going out and buying a $10,000 guitar, and Ben doesn't need to hear me say this, but that's not going to help anybody. It's not going to help me. So all my gear needs to be your gear needs to be as good as you are. So as your playing gets better, your gear is probably going to get better because you're going to notice, oh, well, man, now I'm noticing like, okay, I need a little something different. So your gear it just needs to be good enough to where it's not holding you back. Anything other than that is, you don't have any excuse. I'm sorry. And then your guitar needs to be set up properly. So while you're in Nashville, if your guitar, get these guys to look at your guitar and go, hey man, can you check my intonation and make sure that everything's playing in tune. Play a chord up here. Is that in tune? Are my chords in tune? Everywhere. Play some chords. Check and see if they're in tune. Okay. Make sure your guitar is set up by a professional a couple times a year. Wintertime, summertime, we're about to get cold here. The wood's gonna shrink and the action's gonna get low. And so you might have to adjust for that. In the summertime, your wood's gonna, it's gonna absorb humidity and the action's gonna get higher. So you gotta adjust for that sometimes. So those are a couple things. Another thing that is a very common thing that I see a lot is when you're grabbing these big chords on the guitar, your guitar might be in tune and it might be intonated perfectly. But if you're pressing too hard on the fingerboard, your chords are gonna be out of tune. If you're pulling the strings in any way away from the unity tension of this guitar, your chords are going to be out of tune. Here's a perfect example. If I'm playing this chord, all I got to do is lay my fingers on this guitar. And I want to make sure every one of those notes is ringing nicely, right? If you're hearing some of that shit, that's not good. But it's a very light touch, a very light touch. But here's what happens. If you bend that string the tiniest bit, it's changing. It's changing pitch. If I just lay my finger on that string, okay, that's fine. But a millimeter in a different direction and it's going out of tune. So now if you have 2 or 3 of those notes and one's going up, one's going down, your chord's going to sound like this. And I see a lot of people, they don't know how to make these shapes yet, which is fine, but you got to work at it. So if somebody's playing the C shape and that's not, they're not used to that, then you're going to get this. You know, somebody grabs that, they go. You got to really watch that. So that's a big thing. Another thing is that I see very commonly is a nervous vibrato. So people will go, it's like they're trying to shake fruit off of the end of the neck. It's like, something like, it's like, no, man, you got to be in control of this thing, you know? You know, so sometimes you want to give it a little wiggle, right? So there's this way, and there's that way. So this way is like, if you go this way, you're going to change. That's a true vibrato. The pitch is changing. Tremolo and vibrato are different things. Vibrato means the pitch is changing. That's different than this. That's a volume dip, not a pitch dip. So that's the difference between tremolo and vibrato. Vibrato is changing the actual pitch. Okay, so there's a little bit of that. Let's talk about this real quick, and then we're going to move on and get y'all playing something here. But as far as the way that Nashville works, is we like to get a nice clean bass tone out of the amps. So I don't have any pedals on whatsoever at all. I'm basically going straight from the guitar into this amp with a little reverb from the amp. I like to have reverb. I can't play anything at all without reverb. I have to have a little reverb. That's okay, right? There's not much there, but there's just a little. I can't play without it. I have to have a little reverb. And so it's guitar into the amp with some reverb. I'm going to turn the amp up to about 4.5 or 5 if I'm on a live gig. If I'm in a situation like this or a studio, probably like 3.5. Volume and tone all the way up on the guitar all the time for me. And then just a nice clean tone, right? And so what happens is like we go down on Broadway a lot of times and someone wants you to sit in and they hand you their guitar. I haven't done this in a while, but it's just happened years in the past. It's like somebody's got this nice big Fender tube amp that would sound great, but they've got the volume on 2 and their pedals are like cranked. They got the compression cranked up and everything's cranked up on the pedal board, but when you turn all the pedals off, the amp sounds like this. The amp sounds like that because they've got all their pedals cranked up so much that it sounds, once you get about 10, 15 feet out in front of the stage, you can't hear it. I don't like that. So, you know, you gotta turn it up. Turn it up a little bit to where you're getting the amp really working. So then incorporate your pedals in from that. So that if you have I got the RC booster, I like that pedal. And so you can see like, I turn that up a little too much. So here, if I hit the RC booster, which is my first level of gain, you can see I got it cranked up a little too much. So you can see that doesn't really change a whole lot. It just adds a little bit of body to the already existing tone. If I hit the nobles overdrive, that's very loud, but you can see it's not a big drastic change. It's like it's doing this, right? Tremolo, you heard that? Right? Delay. Very subtle, hardly doing anything. And then I've got this little satellite board with a Strymon Lex on there when I play with the trio. I use it a couple times here and there. And these effects I like to use in sections, not turn it on and leave it on. Like, you know, they call the wah-wah pedal the solo extender because somebody's like played all the licks they know and then they go, oh, I'm gonna hit the wah-wah pedal and play all the same shit. Now it's just wah-wah. No, use the effect like a real effect. And like, you know, if it's a chorus, then back. Or something, you know, think about your effects in sections of the songs to where they have some purpose and some meaning and they might elevate something. So every once in a while I'll use the Lex rotary thing for some good intros and things in there. If I'm doing something really ambient, I might hit this little thing. The little cloud burst. That's fun. Why not have that, right? Okay, so basically I'm saying, you know, crank your amp up and get a nice tone for the room that you're playing in. One last thing about the amps. All these Fender, I like these blackface Fenders from the 60s, and so they all sound the same. Princeton, Deluxe, Vibralux, Pro Reverb, Super Reverb, Twin Reverb. They all sound the same. That's the same tone. Those amps all sound the same. They're not changing in tone. What's changing is the volume level. So a Twin Reverb has the same sound as this. It's just 80 watts. And so you're not going to take a Twin Reverb to a coffee shop or this gig here. And so it's about having the right size. I'm going to turn all those amps to the same spot because they all feel and come alive at like 4.5 or 5. And so I'm not going to take, if I was to take a Twin Reverb to a coffee shop and then turn it on 1.5, well, that defeats the whole purpose. So take a Princeton Reverb to the coffee shop or the clinic or the session or whatever, and then you've got something to work with. You can still get that nice feel. It's not, guitar players don't want to be loud all the time on purpose. It's because we're trying to get the feel of the amp to react in our hands. We want the fast attack from when you hit a note, you want it to react. You want that quick attack. And so it's not about anything other than having the right size amp for the room. If you're playing outdoors at a festival, take a Twin or a Super Reverb, hell, turn it all the way up at that point. Nobody cares because you're outside. But if I was to do that in here, everybody would be leaving. So, does that make sense?
Yeah. I have a quick question on that topic.
Sure.
As far as effects and stuff go, do you have it pretty preset and planned when you go to a gig, or do you ever feel like, this calls for this in this moment?
If I'm playing like last night with the trio, I set it the same.
You do the kind of thing every time?
Every time, yeah, because that's my comfort spot. And I don't have option anxiety, right? If I have some new pedal with 15 knobs on it or some guitar with a bunch of stuff, dude, I don't even want to be in the same room with it. Notice nothing here has more than like 4 or 5 knobs. Nothing has a digital readout, no digital pedals, no amp modelers. You know, that's what sounds good. And so I don't want to have to be, if I'm trying to focus on playing the guitar, the last thing I want to be concerned about is if I've got some pedal set right or what bank I'm in some digital board with presets buried 2,000 deep. You know, that's not for me. And most other people that you're going to encounter, it's not for them either. So there's that. And so just make sure that you're not getting too consumed with gear and that you're playing the guitar. You know, it's like me buying a bunch of golf clubs and I still really suck at golf, you know. So All right, so look, so here's an example. If we're in the key of G and this bar chord, can everybody play this G bar chord? Now, look, here's the thing. Everybody here is going to be at a different skill level. And so that's the hard thing about doing a workshop. This is not one-on-one. I can't zero into every one of your specific needs because there's 25 of you here. And so that's where this gets a little, you're just kind of going to have to be on your own. So if you can make this bar chord, can everybody make this bar chord? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take that bar chord and we're going to reduce it down to this triad on these 3 strings. Everybody has that? Okay, now we're going to go and we're going to visualize this. We're going to visualize this. That's my G. Now I'm going to go up to the 5th fret and I'm going to bar that. Yeah, show the person next to you if they're not sounding right. Is everybody doing that? Okay, now we're going to go up to the D-shaped G chord, next fret here. Does everybody have that? So that'll be the 7th and 8th fret. 7th and 8th fret. Does everybody have that? Okay, now one more time. Look, now we're going to take that. You can visualize that that's a G chord. That's like an A minor triad. And then we're back to G right here. Okay, well, you guys have heard this lick a million times. It's a little bright, I know. I'm going to turn this down. So this. You've heard that, you know. Yeah. So, okay, all right. Okay, hold on a second. So what we're doing is we're taking those shapes. What that's coming, let me break this down for you. So what that's coming from G, A minor, and then G again in your D shape, right? So that's really where that's coming from. But when you take it down to this, if I was to play that in a song, it'd be too much information. But when I break that down into a triad, and then I break it down again and just play the G and the E string, now it's only 2 notes, but it's coming from that chord. It's coming from those chords. Okay, so now watch. If I take that same idea and I drop the 3rd down a half step to make a minor like we learned 2 hours ago, watch. Now, instead of this, I'm going to go to G minor. I'm going to show you how you would change that to a minor idea without having to relearn how to play the guitar. Now I'm going to play this. Right? So all you're doing is flatting the 3rd. I'm flatting it there. This one stays the same. And then I'm flatting that 3rd right there, right? So instead of playing the major, now if it was a G minor, you got the same idea, it's just a minor. Right? Does everybody have that? Can you see how that works? Okay. So now so what I'm saying about this kind of stuff right here is you got to use your brain a little bit. You have to think about what you're doing. You got to look at this, and it has to register that's what's going on. You can't just fly blind here and expect to get anywhere. You're going to have to think a little bit, and you're going to have to really break this stuff down. So, watch. Here's another idea. So what I mean by that is, don't look outside right now. You're going to get really distracted.
Now I want to look outside.
Yeah. You know, yoga pants are the only thing men and women can both agree on. I don't know what happened, but okay. So look, if I'm here, so that means that's my third. Yeah, you can. Don't put that on YouTube. Ben, how we doing, homie? Oh yeah, great. Okay. Okay, so here's the thing. Here, this is what I mean about using your brain a little bit, okay? If this is a third, and that's the root, well, then that means anywhere else on the fingerboard where there's the third and the root together, that rule is going to apply. So if I'm in this chord, and I take this third and this root, now that lick that we did here, that same idea is going to be right here. Right? So, because it's the same two notes. And that's still my G, that's still my A minor, and that's still my G. But now I'm taking the next triad inversion and I'm using that. So if I've got this, now if I drop that third down, there's my minor idea again, right? So if I'm here, look, if I'm in the C shape and I take the root and the third out of this interval, here's my same, it's the first 3 degrees of the major scale. So if I go and I drop that, same thing. Does that make sense?
Quick clarification. The
Yeah.
first one we were doing not adjacent strings. And then,
Right.
And then you changed to a different triad and we were doing adjacent strings. Is that what you switched to?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, they're not always going to be, there's not, some of this stuff's not hard, fast rules. It's just, you know, so yeah, like he said, the first of these I did out of this chord triad, the root and the third are not parallel strings. There's a B string in between there, right? But that's the root and that's the third. But yeah, on this inversion, when you go up to the next group of 3 strings, now that's the third and that's the root. That's just the way it lays out. So don't always ask why that is. You just got to accept it. That's the way it is. I mean, I don't know why they tuned the B string differently than the other strings. I don't know. If they wouldn't have done that, we'd learn the guitar the other way. I don't know. Maybe it's easier. I don't know. But those little things like that, like, look, man, you got an idea. Flat the third. Now you got the same idea over a minor chord. Go to C minor. You know, G. Play some chords. Try to get a little chord progression going where you can kind of use some of these examples, right? So here's a perfect example of that. If I'm playing a G minor and the next chord's a C minor, I'm going to take that big chord. I'm going to play a triad. I'm going to play the D, G, and B string. Right? Okay, well, watch what happens. When I move to that C minor, the G stays there. The G stays on the D string. So then when I reduce that even farther, right? When I take that down even further, now the only thing that's moving is this. If I go to the G and the B string out of that triad, since I know the root, the G note's going to remain. So the only thing is move. So if I'm going to target those notes in a solo, if I take that down to there, now that insinuates D7. So you've got this idea that is musical, that you're developing the idea. So there's something there that is musical, and so you're not just kind of going random. But it's that simple. It's right there. You just got to think about it and dissect these. You know, if you have a chord change that you're playing, try to play the chords in triads. So here's an example of that. This is a little advanced, but it's a good example. If I'm playing an A7, I'm going to use nothing but 3 strings, but I'm going to make sure that the 3 strings that I want to speak are the only ones that are speaking. And so I don't want to be playing this big giant. If somebody, gets you to sit in at some bar and they're doing a funk tune, the last thing I'm going to do is start doing this. Because that's a lot of shit going on there. There's a root, there's another root, there's another root, there's a flat 7, there's another flat 7, there's a 5th. I mean, there's way too much stuff going on. So I'm going to play something a little bit cleaner, like a triad idea. So I'm going to play like A7 triad. You don't try to do this right now, because this is an example, and then we're going to move on to something else. But so this is like, something like this. Okay, that whole thing, let me break that down. So that's A7, because here's A, there's A7. I'm in a hand position that's going to allow me to play the follow-up triad. That's an A triad. So A7 to A. That's the first part of that rhythm part, right? So that's part 1. Part 2 is a G triad on the next group of 3 strings. G triad, D triad, A7 triad with a little hammer on. That's the second section. I'm just showing you this is how you would look at something like this, so it's not overwhelming. You break it up into 3 sections. So here's the first one. Second. Third. Fourth. Right? Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3. All that is right there is a little insertion of a 4. You're still playing an A7. But all that is that's a little G shape. And then, right, that's just a rhythm idea. So, man, I had something really great I was going to tell you, and I can't remember what it is exactly. What were we just doing before that?
Triads on 3 strings.
Oh, yeah. Triads on 3 strings. I can't remember. Say what? Yeah. You don't want to be playing those big giant chords. So, again, that's taking these big chords and breaking them down into these little parts. So here's an example. If I was just going to play from like a little R&B, and I mean old school R&B, not new R&B. So it'd be like this. If I'm in the key of C, there's a good trick. I play these A-shaped chords. I don't play them like this with my ring finger, because my hands are small, I guess. So if I played that chord like that, look at my wrist. I have to bend my wrist way down like this. It's uncomfortable. I don't like doing that. So I'm going to play that chord. Now watch what happens when I play with my little finger. I'm able to keep my wrist wrapped around the fingerboard or the neck very comfortably. Those little things like that, man, are huge. So instead of having to contort my whole arm down here to play that chord like that, just moving to my little finger, I'm playing it just like that, right? So if I drop my ring finger on top of that, I immediately have an A minor 7. So like, whatever. So here's my point. So C to A minor, watch this. So if I go, so when I play that C chord, I'm marking the chord. Then a little walk up, pentatonic walk up, again, never departing from the fundamentals. Super simple, right? The most simple riff you've ever heard in your life was one of the biggest hits, right? The guitar player was making a joke in the studio when he played that, and the producer goes, "Dude, what was that?" He goes, "Oh man, I'm just joking around. That's like the stupidest lick ever." He goes, "No, that's it." And then it was My Girl or whatever, right? My Girl, right? So never departing from the fundamentals. So if I'm going to go from C to A minor, a little lick, then marking the next chord. Right, so C to A minor, F to C. So there's all these little rhythm things you can put inside there. It's got to be in the right hand position. So if I go C, I have an option to play my F right here. I'm not playing that whole chord, but I am marking the bass note and then focusing on that triad. Might do something like that. All that is your G shape, scale up to the E shape. That's your C scale. So if you know where that is, you can separate it. You know, that's where we're heading with this. But I'm not playing those big giant chords. I'm freeing my hand up to be able to play. I mean, you've heard Jimi Hendrix was the first guy to ever do that. So it's about knowing the big chords, but freeing your hand up to where you can play some other stuff. You don't want to be bound to these big giant chord shapes all the time, but you have to be able to see the framework and the fundamental to be able to break these apart. So if I do that, you're going to go, well, where's all that coming from? Well, I can see exactly where that's coming from. That's coming from this shape. There's my D, but I know if I hammer that on, that's the middle section of that G chord. So if I go, well, that's the triad from the D shape. That's that shape. There's my C. You know, that's all coming from these triads and these chords. And so, you know, yeah, I've spent a lot of time mapping this stuff out, and I continue to spend a lot of time mapping this stuff out. But that's what you got to do. I mean, you got to jump in there and just see these connections, you know. This is the most uncomfortable stool I could have chosen. God damn.
Lower it a little bit. Lower it.
Oh, can you? Yeah, let's lower it. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, right there. And you have to sit on it.
Oh, God. I'm fine. It'll be all right. Okay, I know everybody's getting tired, man. So let's have some questions up to this point. Let's start from this side and go all the way over to this side. Hold on. Anybody over here? Yes.
It should just be me, but it's a gear question.
A gear question? Yeah.
Speaking about setup and intonation and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Certain guitars.
Hold on. Hey, who's playing?
Pasta.
Certain guitars I've owned, particularly like a Les Paul or something. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's just the Les Paul. I can have it intonated what I think is proper, and it'll be in tune at the 12th fret, the harmonic, the fretted note. Everything looks good, but I know you can press too hard and sharpen things.
Yeah.
You play like a G chord or a B chord down at the nut,
Yeah.
and just even with modest pressure, it's in tune. But then when you fret the note, it's sharp.
Well, your nut might be a little high. Where do you live?
Wilmington, North Carolina.
That's probably part of the problem.
Yeah, with an animal.
I say that jokingly, but I'm serious. Now, if
Everybody good around.
I know. So here's what you got to do. If you're really serious about getting your guitar set up, send it here, or send it to Glaziers, or send it to a pro. I mean, those guys. There's a beauty of living in this town and having these guys at our disposal. So if you're really serious about it, do it while you're here.
That's
You know?
typically a nut issue, though.
It can be, yeah. And so a lot of times, like I learned from Uncle Larry, you know, a lot of tuning issues. I was having a nightmare problem when I did this Artist Works curriculum update a couple weeks ago down in St. Petersburg. Well, it was August in St. Petersburg. So I take this guitar down there, and all of a sudden I just noticed, I was like, man, I don't know what's going on. This guitar's not staying in tune. I'm checking my tuning every 5 minutes. It just feels weird. And I thought, man, what is going on? I put graphite in the nut. I'm like, you know, putting a pencil in here, and I'm like, God, what's going on? So as soon as I got back to Nashville, the next day it was like back to being normal. And it just was the humidity down there. It just like changed so much. It just threw it all out of whack. So, but I know that the nut is a big deal. So you can feel, if you're down here and you're fretting the F and you're having to press really hard, that means your nut's too high. And you want to get that really dialed in, because that can be very uncomfortable. And a lot of this is just a comfort thing, but you got to be careful with the nut. That's a pro move. You gotta, your nut has to be dialed in. And so, you know, and so do the saddles. I mean, you know, the points of contact have to be really, really happening. So I always want to make sure my bridge saddles, I got lucky on this Danocaster because these bridge saddles are amazing. They're so super consistent. They sound really good. They're not sitaring out like a brass saddle would on an old Telly. You know, those were such a nightmare. I mean, every 2 days they're sitaring out because they're digging a groove in the brass. These are amazing. I don't know what the hell they are, but they're compensated and they're just nice, you know. So there's that. You got to have good frets. If a guitar has really small vintage frets on, they're going to be very hard to bend on, you know. And so unless you're Steve Cropper and you're playing rhythm guitar all night long, having a little bit bigger fret is going to be easier to bend. Like most of you guys have more modern guitars, you're not going to have that problem. But if you go in here and grab one of these 52 Tellys off the wall and it's got original frets in it, man, you're not even going to be able to bend that thing at all because there's no fret there. So I would recommend grabbing all your guitars and jumping in the car one day and bringing them down here and spending a couple days and getting everything set up. And then you'll be good. But a lot of local guys in these small towns, or even, you know, even a place like Atlanta probably is not up to the level of Nashville, because these guys are just, I mean, dude, you go to Glazer's shop and it's like, he's got Peter Frampton's guitar, he's got Vince Gill's guitar, he's got 10 session players' guitars over here, and they've been doing it for so long. They've got all these problems figured out, you know. And so there's no guesswork. It's like they dial it in, they know, and then you're good. But setup can make a huge difference. I mean, we need all the help we can get. So we definitely want to make sure our guitars are tuning up properly and playing and staying in tune, you know. Same with amps. You want your amp to be working good, you know. I mean, just because you have an old Fender amp doesn't mean it's going to be working properly, or the speaker might need to be replaced, or, you know, we buy these old amps, but we take them to a guy and make sure he goes through them and makes sure that when we go to work, they're quiet and they're, you know, like this, I don't know, this one seems to be behaving pretty well. Sounds fine. So, yeah, I hope that helps. I'm sure Wilmington.
Sounds like I know you come back to Nashville.
Yeah, just come back to Nashville, or you know, if that's a Paul Reed Smith, hell, send it to them.
This one's not.
It's not okay.
I
Yeah,
saw the one that had a problem.
yeah, or just get rid of it. That's the other thing, man. Just if you got a guitar that's giving you problems, just get rid of it. You know. And then here's another thing that guys do a lot of times. I see this in Nashville with young people a lot, is they want to take a guitar and they want to start modifying it, and they want to tinker with it, and they want to change the pickups, and they want to do this. And like Uncle Larry's YouTube channel is a perfect place to learn about this, because you'll just see him playing a great example of a Telecaster. Okay, if you want a Strat, get a good Strat. If you want a Les Paul, get a good Les Paul. If you want a 335, get a good 335. You don't have to spend 80 grand, but don't get a 335 and then expect it to sound like a Strat. Or just because you put humbuckers in the Telecaster, you think it's going to be a Les Paul. Why would you do that? If you want a humbucker guitar, just get a humbucker guitar. So there's only these classic sounds that we all love. You got Vox, Fender, and Marshall amps. Anything other than that is just going to be an imitation of one of those three sounds that we've heard for 50 years. Chances are, some records that you guys love, it's going to be a Strat, a Tele, a Les Paul, or a 335. Now, of course, there's a bunch of other stuff, but let's get real. Those are the ones that really matter. I'm kidding, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, there's a reason why these things are so classic, and they couldn't really, I mean, look, in all these years, people have tried to, you know, reinvent the wheel with Stratocasters, and they had the Buzz Feiten tuning system and all this stuff. I was like, oh man, it's just too much, man. It's too much. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Next.
Advice I get a lot is to learn from the people who came before you, transcribe, learn their pieces, and then just do extra work to figure out how does that thing fit so you can use it in other scenarios.
Yeah,
but something I struggle with is, even if I kind of understand how does it fit to the chords and that sort of thing, I feel like I'm still sort of just regurgitating what they're saying. And using language as a metaphor. I don't want to just speak in other people's words. I want to speak with my own voice. So advice on when you learn something from someone else, how to really integrate it into your own playing and make it part of your own voice.
That's a great question. So my answer, did everybody hear that question? So that's a great question. So that's why I try to teach people how to fish and not just give people like a bunch of licks. Because if you learn licks from somebody, which I've got a couple licks that I learned, and I don't ever use them because they only fit in that one spot, in that one scenario, and you don't know where it's coming from. And so I would rather show somebody these fundamentals that are going to eventually get you to the spot to where you're able to improvise. Now, look, but that being said, when you're getting into this, yes, it's a great idea to learn some B.B. King licks, learn some Mark Knopfler licks, learn some Eric Clapton, I guess, learn some of these vocabularies that you need to do that. You need to copy somebody verbatim to get the feel and the timing and how they're phrasing it and stuff like that. But you can't just, if you the I guess the part where you get stuck is if you don't get to that point where you're breaking out on your own. And if you go to this fundamental chordal background approach, I think that's what's going to do it. But you're right. I mean, hey man, look, I sat and copied Tony Rice licks and Allman Brothers and whatever records my uncle had. I mean, I would sit and learn that stuff note for note. But then it's taken a long time to kind of develop some sort of a style. And so everybody here is going to agree on this Mount Rushmore of guitar players that we all think are great. There's going to be about 5 of them up here that we all can agree on are incredible. But as each person in here's musical taste, family tree, root system kind of breaks down and gets more specific, that's when your style is going to come out. Because if you just like Stevie Ray Vaughan, guess what? None of us in here are ever going to be able to play Stevie Ray Vaughan better than Stevie Ray Vaughan did. And so, but if you like Stevie Ray Vaughan and then you like, somebody over here and you like a couple of these different guys, and then you're going to start sounding like yourself because you're influenced by your own taste in musicians and music. And so, hey, I like bluegrass, I like Cuban music, I like African music, I like, I like some pop music, I like some of these different things. So I might go, hey, I love Cuban salsa music, and this person over here, I don't even know what that sounds like. Okay, well then you're not going to be influenced by that music. But I like all this stuff, so that I kind of try to steal bits and pieces from all that stuff. Now, I'm not going to sit down and transcribe a whole Wes Montgomery solo, because guess what? I'm lazy too. I don't want to work that hard. I want to do what's easy. But I might hear one thing in there that I go, that's the piece of that I like the most. I'm going to learn that. I'm going to throw that in the bag. And then I might use that as an idea somewhere. But if you just play a whole solo, it's kind of like you're just memorizing something at that point. And it's great, but you do have to get past that at some point, And that's just developing your vocabulary, But the more music you can listen to and the more open-minded you can be about music, the better. But also, to add to that, don't learn something just because somebody told you that you need to learn it. Now, I'm not talking about these fundamentals. That I do.
Everyone but you.
That I do agree on. But I'm talking about music. So if somebody comes up to me and goes, man, you really need to learn this Brazilian music. Well, I don't really like Brazilian music that much yet. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't like Brazilian music as much as I like Cuban music because it's darker and bluesier and got more soul to it. Now, maybe in 10 years, when my ear develops and I get a little older and more understanding of the world and more patient, maybe I'll sit down and go, wow, I was really missing this Brazilian music's fucking beautiful. I don't know. But for right now, I like this other stuff a little better. So I'm not going to learn that. I like flamenco guitar. I think it's the most soulful shit in the world. But, you might not like every artist's song. You might like one song, I love Mark Knopfler, but I don't love every song. So you just steal from what you can. I mean, we've all stolen from everybody, man. I stole a gazillion things from all kinds of people. But yeah, you got to get there eventually. But so somebody was asking about how to connect. Let's get back to some guitar stuff. Somebody was asking how to connect these chords. Once you learn the chords, so you want to learn this stuff horizontally, and then it's going to connect vertically. So it's not going to. You're going to have a hard time connecting this stuff horizontally until you learn it vertically. So if I learn this, well, those same notes are, that arpeggio is going to work up the fingerboard because this note is also here. This note is also here. This one is also here, and there. It's all going to start repeating. So you just got to realize every note in this chord is going to be, they're all the same notes in these chords. They're just inverting themselves up the neck with the way that the guitar is tuned. Every string has a major scale on it. If I start the major scale here, or I could start it here. Oh shit. So every string has the G major scale on it. It's just depending on where you're starting. So all this is going to be really weird until you really get into it. And one day you're going to see it and go, oh my God, that's it. That makes sense. Now I see how this is working. But until then, man, it's a lot of stuff. I mean, you know, looking at this thing and you go, good Lord, I mean, what's going on here? And so until you start getting into the chords, it's going to be tricky. Now, with that being said, I'll play the pentatonic and show you exactly what chord shape it's coming from. So if I start here, I'm going to go big G bar chord into the D shape, C shape, A shape, G shape. So if I start here and I use my proper fingers and I play my third finger, as soon as I slide my third finger up to that 7th fret, the major third of that chord, now watch, I'm going from the G, from the E shape. As soon as I do that, I'm really in the D shape, right? So if I go, you got to know the pentatonic pattern. I mean, you got to know it inside and out. You have to know that. So if I go, that is directly out of that triad from that D shape chord. So E shape. Now look, when I drop my first finger on that root, look what's right here. There's my D shape. Those fingers, they just drop down there without even having to think about it because you're set up in the right position. So again, if I go, there's my D shape, right? If I keep going, now watch. Now, boom, 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 boom. I've played a full octave of pentatonic. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 1. Those are the numbers if you want the numbers. I'm on 1 now already again. So now watch. Now the next octave is going to be from here, from there to there. So watch. There's the D shape. Now watch. First finger. Same exact thing I did here. Those notes are the same, so watch. Third finger, slide. Well, guess what's right there? The C shape. It's right there. So again, from the top. Now the next octave. Now watch. Now I'm there. So now I'm going to switch to my first finger because I need these fingers to slide up. So I'm going to make a quick switch to my first finger now on that G. Now watch what happens here. Same exact notes as I just did on the previous 2 octaves. Now there's my A shape. So root, second, third. There's my A shape. Then watch. There's my G shape. So if I go back down, watch. G shape, A shape, C shape, D shape, E shape. So that goes all the way down. If I was going to go to the C, here's my A shape C chord. That's the same as my G chord up here. But the C just happens to be there. The D is there. There's E minor. There's F. It's the same. You know, you're just really, you know, you're working it out and getting into it. So here's the G pentatonic. If I was going to go from G to C, remember that lick we just heard a second ago? I can't play it right, but that's it. That's just G to C. So if I go, that's C, here's D. You know, I mean, that's playing over chords, but that's very basic. Go to E minor, G, E minor, relative, C, A minor, relative. Okay, I gotta cover something real quick here. I'm not gonna be doing my job. Let's get back to this real quick. So this is something that you gotta know. So major gets a pentatonic. We covered that. Minor gets a pentatonic. Okay, you can get some mileage out of that. But when you go to the dominant 7 chord, I don't think I finished talking about this. We go to the dominant 7 chord, you don't get a pentatonic for the dominant 7 chord because it has elements of the major and the minor pentatonic. For that, you know, for lack of a better explanation, you're getting both. But it's still a dominant chord, which means the major third is still there. But you're getting this flat 7. That's like a blues. If you've heard jazz, like a jazz blues. Very dominant. Every one of those chords is a dominant 7 chord. Okay, well, here's the thing about that. If I played a major pentatonic against that dominant 7 chord, it's going to sound like this. So there's the sound. You've heard that a gazillion times. Over that chord, doesn't work. It's too white bread. Now, if I play minor pentatonic over this chord, you've heard that 8 gazillion times. That doesn't work because you're not hearing enough of this with the minor pentatonic, and with the major pentatonic, you're not hearing enough of that. So here's what happens. On a dominant 7 chord, here's the foundation for the dominant 7 chord, which is extremely important. So if you know your major scooter, I guarantee it. So,
He's looking at the other thing.
Dude, I've seen scooters get hit by cars right here in front of, see that corner right there? I've seen 2 people get hit by cars on scooters right there and get up and get back on the scooter and take off because they're so drunk. They can't feel anything. Broad daylight right there. Okay, so look, so on the dominant 7 chord, here's the sequence for the dominant 7 chord, because here's what happens. If you know the major and minor pentatonic, it's going to get you to right here, and you're done until you take it to the next spot, which is this dominant 7 chord, which you are going to really need to dig into that if you want to get something out of this, which is why I'm here. You know, that's going to take you to the next spot. And so the sequence is the same, except for one thing, the pentatonic. So you got the chord as the foundation, the arpeggio, and then it goes right to the scale, which people are going to tell you that this is the Mixolydian mode. I hate that. So we're going to call that the dominant 7 scale. And I'm going to show you how that works. So here's the scale. It's the major scale, except we're flatting the 7 because guess what? The chord has a flat 7 in it. So for us to sound like we know what we're doing, we have to play the note in the lead guitar that accommodates the chord, right? So you've heard that enough today. So that's the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 1. So all that means is you play the major scale. When it gets to that sound, you flat it. So that's a flat 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 1. Next octave. Right? Okay. That doesn't mean that it has to be a dominant 7 chord for you to play that sound. It could be, like I said earlier, it could be, Willie Nelson could be playing a straight up G major, but you're still going to go, to the 4 chord, right? So it's just a extremely crucial, very useful thing here. So when you hear guys play the blues and you really like the way that they're playing, chances are they're playing a little bit more than just the pentatonic over a dominant 7. So case in point, if I do this, if I'm playing over this big G bar chord, dominant 7, and I do something like this, or, okay, well that's a kind of a major sounding lick. But if I really take the grease out of it, like those tacos we just had a second ago, if I take that out and I do this, okay, that sounds like vanilla bullshit. But if I just add this one little thing, it greases it up just enough. So if I go, just that little inflection changes from this to, okay, well then my next note, because that was pretty major, the next note needs to be a blue note or a darker note. So I'm going to play this. All right, let me phrase it the way I just did. Sorry, one more time. So it's a mixture of the major and the minor sounds together. And that's what playing over the dominant 7, you got to get into that if you want to, but I highly suggest getting into the sound of the dominant 7 chord and departing from the minor and major pentatonics, because that's what's going to take you to the next, I hate to say take you to the next level because that sounds like so stupid, but it's going to get you to the next chapter of your guitar playing, I think, and allow you to access some sounds that maybe you've been hearing that you don't know how to get to. And that's how you do it. So that's an example of going up a major idea, then back down a minor kind of idea. Now watch. So at the very end of that darker phrase, I'm going to add the major third back in to resolve back to the sound of that chord. So here would be a great example of that. If I go, okay, that's a minor pentatonic. But right there, since that's my D shape, and I can see that the major third is right there, and the D7 is right there, I'm going to play an idea out of that. And then flat 7, same exact idea on the next set of strings. So basically you've got, or, so you're getting the, you're starting on the 5th. That's an example of the combination of kind of a minor pentatonic framework, but with adding the major third to bring you back home to that sound, right? So, okay, so let's move on from that real quick. Now, if I go to the 4 chord, now I'm playing C7. Classic blues, right? So here's a great way to start accessing the A shape 9 chord, the blues chord. So if I play an A, so this A shape 7 chord, dominant 7 chord, and this 9 chord, that doesn't change anything. You're going to play the same stuff over that chord. It doesn't matter. This is all based on dominant 7. Doesn't matter that that's a 9. Doesn't matter that that's a 7. You're going to play the same thing over that chord like nothing changed. It doesn't matter. It's the same sound. So a great way to play over this, and you've probably heard this riff a million times. I want you to learn this one. So if I'm in C, I'm working off the A shape, but I'm thinking about the 9 chord and this A shape dominant 7 chord. So I'm going to start with my second finger on the 3rd fret A string. And the riff is going to sound like this. So it's going to be root, third, fifth, flat, 7. First 4 notes of our arpeggio. So now we're going to go to this. So yeah. Try to use your middle finger. Try to use your ring finger and your first finger though on this part. So okay, raise your hand if you don't have that. Raise your hand if you don't have it. Okay, so you guys just focus on this. Try to use the same fingers I'm using. Start with your middle finger. That's right. Yeah. Now watch, then do this. Right? Now the next part is this. So third, fourth, fifth, root. So okay, so you don't have to play that perfectly right now, but that's the idea. So that riff is a combination of the dominant 7 arpeggio, and then the dominant 7 scale over this A shape would be. Okay, so here's the thing. When you change from the root chord to the 4 chord, you can play that dominant scale over the C chord as well. But you got to understand, don't play the G dominant scale over C. Play the C dominant scale over the C chord. Then when you go to the 5, play the D dominant 7 scale. And then back. Now those are just the notes of the scale. But so you got to rearrange those notes into these little phrases, which could be like this. So as soon as you hit that major third, that spells out that chord. Go to D7. You could go to, if the chord went to F for some reason, so whatever dominant 7 chord it goes to, you're outlining the chord in the same way, and using those notes. Look, if I'm playing a G13 or want to access those sounds, like a more uptown kind of swing blues or something, again, the guy could just be playing, the rhythm guitar player could just be playing a G chord. But if it's a bluesy song, I can use all these notes. I can use the 2nd, the 6th, so it's all these notes are coming from these chords. So here's a G13, which would be a G7, but I'm putting my little finger on the E string, 5th fret, right? So So that's what dominant 7 sounds like. It's not minor, it's not major. It's a combination of both of those. And that's how you start messing around with that, is just don't forget the chord, the arpeggio, and then the scale. So, I mean, this could go on for weeks breaking that down, but that's the basics of that. I think just knowing that the pentatonic, you know, like I never forget this guy said, he goes, well, I know the minor pentatonic. I can use that over everything, right? I go, well, no, if you want to sound like you know what you're doing. Or even close to it. But so there's a little bit of that. Does anybody have any questions on that? That's just the blues. That's the sound of the blues if you really want to get into it, you know?
You were playing those chords that look like you're doing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like what
Those are like,
are you muting all?
these are like Freddie Green style chords. And what those are, they're 3-note dominant 7 chords, which can also be minor. They can be diminished. That's like a jazz blues introduction would be to take this big chord and break it down into this voicing, which would be middle finger on the bass, ring finger on the flat 7, little finger on the major 3rd, and you're muting everything else and just letting those 3 notes speak.
So you're just
Yeah.
you're just playing 3 notes.
Just the tritone and the bass note. So those you can walk those, you know.
The A string's muted, right?
Yeah, then when you go to the 4 chord, the G stays in the bass. So you're not doing this because that gets real muddy, right? So if I do this, you know.
Your A string was muted that whole time?
A string muted the whole time. Yeah. But so that's a lot, but what happens there is like if I'm walking that up, that little walk up, all that is it's that part of the D shape. I'm just taking that and I'm using these fingers, you know, and then you get all this. Once you get those positions, then you can move them all around. So then I've got, you know, but the basics of that is all that's moving is this, watch. And this is a great lesson actually this doesn't have to be jazz, it's not jazz. But so if I play G7 and I single out the 3rd and the flat 7, if I go to C, that moves down a half step. That's the major 3rd and the flat 7 of G. When that tritone moves down a half step, that becomes the flat 7 and that becomes the major 3rd of the C chord. So without even doing anything, you're just inverting that, right?
You would go up a
Then
fret
you go,
5.
then that's the 5. That's D7. So that becomes the flat 7 and the major 3rd of the D7. Now, you don't need to know all that because it's just the sound that you're going for. But that's, what's crucial here is the hand position and the fingering. Because if you get that down, then the rest is easy. It just falls right into place. But if you gotta have the right fingering for this, or it's never gonna work right. So, like if I'm doing this, my bass note G is gonna stay with my ring or my middle finger, and it's very important to use your little finger and ring finger for the upper extensions of this chord. So, because what's gonna happen is, watch, these are gonna fall right down there where they're already sitting to cover the tritone of the 4 chord. So if I go here, it's very comfortable. Watch, D minor 7 to the 1, to the 4, to the 1. That's a walk up, but that's just that part of that. See, once you see the shapes, you're good. So that's That's the D shape, but I'm just taking the fifth, the root, and the third from that. Now watch this shape. Again, I can't say it enough. The hand position and the fingering is crucial, because if that's not lined up, and I try to do some other fingering, it's never going to line up properly. But watch how convenient this is. If I go here, and I'm walking this down to the 5 chord, now that shape is the same as that. I'm just, you know, it's right there, right? So, well, guess what's next? There's my C7. Watch, raise the root. I got a diminished chord. Then watch what's next. Root, chromatic, down to the 6, A7, 5 chord, 3 minor, 6, 2, 5, 1. So that's like a jazz blues introductory kind of thing. But those chords, so Freddie Green with the Count Basie band played this big arch top with action like that high, and he was banging on the guitar because he had to get that acoustic guitar arch top above a horn section orchestra and a piano and a drummer. So if he was playing an acoustic and it was like going, he needed like big strings, high action, and he was trying to come up with the voicings that were clean but could also be heard loud enough over the big band orchestra back in the 40s or whatever. So he came up with these voicings, which are very nice, you know. So that you can keep going. And then once you see how those chords are kind of, it all comes back to the chord where if you wanted to outline a 2-5-1, if anybody does want to learn some introductory to jazz, that would be like this. Instead of playing a blues like okay, that's just 3 chords. 1, 4, 5. Now, if I added a 2 to that, it would sound like this. 4 chord, 1 chord. So all that is like Caledonia by whoever played that song. Caledonia, bah. You've heard that a million times. But that's the line. Instead of going to the 5, they put a 2 minor to the 5, to the 1. And that's where jazz, that was the first note added to the blues that started creating jazz. Because they could play more harmonic, more sophisticated harmonic content over the 2 chord, going to the 5 chord. So then you get what I was going to get into. I probably don't have enough time, but superimposing some of these ideas over, which is, it's advanced because you got to kind of hear it, and the fundamentals got to be in place. But if I'm going to raise that root, watch, it comes back to this. All that is what I showed you a minute ago. I'm just applying it to a major chord, diminished, going to the 2 chord, to the 5 chord, to the 1 chord. So to outline that, it sounds like you're on the ranch around the campfire. Old, it's like you're on the ranch, right? But in a jazz application, that would be more like, so I'll go 1, A minor triad. There's my major third of the D chord. So it's not that hard. if you can just see the bones of where that's coming from. You can hear the chords plain as day. Because you're just playing the exact notes of that chord. That's diminished. That moves up, you know. There's A minor. A minor 7. That's D7. And that melody walks back. Right back to that root note. So here would be an example of going from the pentatonic kind of idea to adding a scale tone to incorporate some melody. So, man, I don't even know what time it is. Somebody's gonna have to tell me. We got till 2:30, right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, just tell me when I'm getting close. So, if I go from G, let's do this. Let's go. Okay, so if I'm going from C to F, and I don't just want to go, which I would practice that because you got to know that. But if I'm going to go to C to F and I want to add something that's more melodic, I'm going to do this. So when I hit that third under the F, it sounds more like a melody. So again, here's C. Here's another trick. I have found that going up the pentatonic, the sixth note doesn't sound as good ascending as it does descending for some reason. It starts sounding like too much of a pentatonic exercise if you put the emphasis on the wrong spot. So that's another thing, is just knowing where to land with these notes. I mean, you got to be targeting the chord tones, the 1, 3, and the 5 of these chords, because if you're noodling around and you're emphasizing the wrong notes and stuff, then you got to bring it back. Keep bringing it back. So if I'm in C, I'm gonna do this little thing where it's going root, second, third, but then I'm gonna play the fifth and the root right away instead of playing the sixth note. So instead of this, I'm gonna play this, which is directly out of your G shape triad, right? So if I go, now watch, I can keep going up. And that gets you right up to the money note. I'm gonna go to my root, right? So again, up here. Now, as soon as I hit the root C, I'm going to go down the scale, but I'm going to land on the major third of the F chord, which sounds like this. Here's C. Because there's my, if the guitar, other instrument was playing an F, or the bass player, you would hear that, right? Now back to C. To G. Right? So that's how this stuff starts coming together. So there's no way I can show everybody in here note for note how to do all this, but it's just, you got to really listen and you got to have some intent. So the last couple minutes, I'll say this. When you pick up the guitar, I don't care what skill level you're on, it doesn't matter. But this is what I try to do. When you pick up the guitar, before you play any single note Because here's the thing, any single note you play, you know, if I just did this, that just doesn't really mean anything, because I don't know what, if you played that, I would go, okay, well, what does that mean? I don't know what key you're in, because that could be, you could put a bunch of chords under that. You could put F sharp minor under that. You could put A under that. You could put, I don't know what you're doing. So what I suggest is, if you are going to practice anything at all, try to have some intent with what you're doing when you sit down and pick up the guitar. All I mean by that is play a chord and try to stick with the sound of that chord for 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to show you an example, but you know, maybe play a G major and just stay in the G major chord for a minute. If you start drifting, go back and play the chord to get your tonal center back. And then maybe you have a progression that you want to play to. It could also be random. I recommend that. You know, maybe play, like if I did this, what I'm saying is the chords can make sense, but you can also kind of just go random to kind of quiz yourself. So if I played G, if I picked up the guitar first thing in the morning, which I don't do very often, but you grab the guitar, you play a G. Okay. Okay, that's G major. Just stay in G major. Okay, then maybe you go to like, you go to A minor, you know. And just play that chord for a minute. You know. Okay, but don't waver from that sound until your ear knows what's going on. You know, try to stay in the realm of that sound, and then maybe go to, I don't know, maybe go to C7 or something. Just random. It doesn't have to make sense. The chords don't have to make sense for this little exercise. It's not a progression. It's just kind of, you're almost quizzing yourself and going, okay, well now I'm going to go to like C7. Okay. Hang out there for a minute. And then, you know, I'm just saying, break it up a little bit. You know, if you're used to doing the same thing, try to actually work on something. You know, play one of these chords with this specific sound and try to really get into playing over that sound, you know, because that's what music is. Major and minor are not genres. These are sounds that are used in songs, right? So a song could have a major chord, a minor chord, a dominant 7 chord, a major 7 chord, diminished chords. You know, all these chords are used to make music. So in order for us to play over said song, you have to be able to navigate through these different sounds. And so with this, you know, with these fundamentals, I think it's the quickest way that makes sense to be able to navigate through those sounds. And otherwise, if you don't do that, it's just going to be forever limiting and frustrating. Okay, I think we're done here.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
What do you think? Just kidding.
When you just played that G, when you first did that first thing.
Yeah.
Were those pentatonic notes that you were moving around on? It sounded like it.
Well, yeah. So yeah, you can play the pentatonic, but here's.
You weren't thinking that way. You were just.
Well, I'm just thinking about playing something that has a phrase to it, right? So this could be a phrase, right? So here's a little thing. So, oh, I got to show you this, man. This is huge. Okay, so phrase. So to get off the hamster wheel of the major scale, you got to know this. This is a great. I think I might have came up with this, but I'm not sure. But it's just an idea that I think is really good. And so this is I call this the phrasing trick. It works for major and minor. It doesn't work for dominant 7 because with dominant 7 you have to add a 4th note. So with major, I got root, third, fifth. With minor, I have root, flat, 3, fifth. To make a dominant 7, I have to add a fourth note, root, third, fifth, flat, 7. So for this exercise, until somebody shows me how to do it, I don't know how to do it. If Jack Rooch was here, he could probably teach me how to do it. But so if I go major, groups of 3 strings, but the purpose of this exercise is it teaches you what note is okay to land on and resolve on. Because if you're playing a pentatonic, to your point, it's like, yeah, I was playing a lot of pentatonic stuff. If you don't land on the right note, it's not going to sound like music. So just because I'm in G, and I know the G major pentatonic, hear how that 6 sounds better going down than it does going up? It's really weird. Anyway, if I land on this note, you know, or now I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what key you're in. I don't know what's going on. But if you do this, I'm heading towards, that's very simple, but I'm heading towards one of the resolved notes of that chord, either the root or the third or the fifth. And so with this exercise, if I start in the right hand position, let's use this big G bar chord. Try to play this with me if you can. I'm going to start, it's three notes at a time. And you can't fail with this. It works every single time. Start on the root and just go 1, 2, 3. Now 3, 4, 5. Now stop right there. Don't try to go any farther. Now on the fifth, you're going to go 5th, 6th, root. So this is not a pentatonic, it's not a scale, but it's parts of all of it. But it's just going to get, so this is what the whole thing is going to sound like. Before we do it, let me play the whole thing and then we'll do it together. Play a G chord for me, just to. Okay, that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it sounds better than this. Right, so what that does is that lets you pause on the note that is going to be okay to land on. So if I do this, play the G chord again. Okay, that I would much rather hear somebody land on those notes than not. So, so here's what we do. I got out of the closed position. Stay in the closed position and just go 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, root, and then again 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, root, root, second, third. And then let's go back down. 3, 2, 1, 1, 6, 5, 5, 4, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, 6, 5, 5, 4, 3, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now you don't have to call out those numbers and all that stuff. That might be more confusing than it's worth, but that's the idea. And that gets you to the resolved note in those sounds. Okay, so now watch. When we go to minor. Now we're going to go to minor. Now this is what the minor one is going to sound like. It's going to be the same thing, three notes at a time. And if you trust the pattern, it works every time. So watch. every single time. So that shows you what notes are okay to pause on, because otherwise it's just, you know, it's like, where do I stop? How do I make a melody? Well, with this, you can kind of do that. So it's the same pattern: 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5 flat 7. 1. Don't worry about the numbers. Don't worry about the numbers. But the pattern is. It works every time. It just does. So
the ones you're holding on, those are all 1s and 3s and 5s.
yeah.
The ones you're holding, they're all the root and chord.
Yeah. Yeah. And that works in every single chord shape too. That works in every chord shape. If you just follow that pattern, it's awesome.
You're basically threading your way from a 1 to a 3 to a 5 to a 3 to a. You're sort of like you keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's
Same
just
idea for dominant 7 too?
no. It doesn't work with dominant 7 because dominant 7, the three note pattern
Gotcha.
doesn't work over dominant 7. But if I go up to the D shape, C shape, A shape, G shape. So, and then with those scales, you want to connect those two linearly. So if I start, let's do a G minor real quick. I mean, this is just an example, but if you start up here, if I start here out of the G shape minor scale, okay, well, I'm not going anywhere. I'm painting myself into a corner down here on these dusty frets. I want to get back down here to where the guitar sounds good, right? So if I'm here, oh shit, I'm gonna slide with my first finger. Every time I go down with my first finger, it's taking me to a different spot. So if I'm right here, let's see. So every time you slide down with your first finger, you're putting these fingers in the position they need to be in. If I go up, I was going to tell you one other rule you might want to write down. I mean, this is pretty advanced, but you got to know this because this changed everything. So, a couple quick rules. This is going to seem confusing right now, but as you get into this, it'll open up some doors. 2 quick little rules. I know we got to go, but if you're playing, and I'll just take this as an example. Now, this applies to every key, but this is we got to start somewhere. So let's start in A7. So if I'm playing an A7 chord, I can play ideas out of E minor 7 and G major 7 over A dominant 7. And what that sounds like is it play an A7. Okay, so real quick, what that is right there, that's an E minor arpeggio resolving to the major third of the A chord. Don't ask me why that works. I think it's this, because it's the same notes as the A dominant 7 scale. So the fact that I wouldn't think about that too much, but here's a G major 7 over A. Right? So that's really G and E minor are relative. So all this, it works. But now the trick is, if you stick in either one of those too literally for too long, it's going to sound like you're playing in the wrong key. But if you just pepper those little ideas in there, it really changes everything up. So here's a G major 7 idea over A7. Here's an A7. So that you think that's a lot, but all that really is here's a G major 7 chord. There's A, there's G major 7. I'm going up, right up the G major 7 arpeggio. Then right back down the A dominant 7 scale. Now I know that's a lot, but trust me, it's not that hard. So once you get these arpeggios and stuff under your belt, that's what I said earlier. If you don't like the sound of a major 7 chord, it has other applications. So if you're in a dominant 7, A dominant 7, you can play the 5 minor ideas and the flat 7 major 7 ideas over the 1 dominant 7. That's as fancy as I'm ever going to sound right there.
Do that one more time.
If you're playing a dominant 7 chord, that's your umbrella key, A7. You can play ideas from the 5 minor and the flat 7 major 7 over the 1 chord. Okay, now keep that in mind, and we're going to move to this exact same concept, except we're going to go from A dominant 7, now we're going to go to A minor. So if I'm playing in A minor, I can play out of C major 7 and D7 over A minor. Same exact licks I played on the other one out of the G major 7, I'm going to play over C7. Watch what that sounds. Play an A minor chord. Or something like that, right? So that's a C major 7 arpeggio because it's starting on the minor third of the A. So the note that makes A minor is C. So if I start on C, I'm kind of just hyper extending the sound of that one note by playing it in a chordal form. But a lot of those notes, as you get into that, you're going to see that it's all the same thing. So here's a C major 7 arpeggio over A minor. D9 or D7 is just the same. Here's a A minor, here's a D9. So then you get that minor 6 sound, this. So if somebody's playing, I'll play right out of D major 7. But you got to resolve back to A minor, or it's going to sound really weird, right? So if I'm playing that's a lot, but you get it. And so again, C major 7, you know, anywhere there's a C on the fingerboard, you can play a C major 7 idea over A minor. Now here's where this gets really interesting is if I'm playing back to the dominant 7, if I'm playing a blues, or go to the D chord, that same concept applies when you go to the 4 chord. So now if I'm playing D7, the 4 chord of A blues, I can play out of A minor ideas now and C major 7 ideas over the D7. So it just keeps it keeps working. So then if I go to the 5 chord of an A7 blues, guess what? Over that E7, E dominant 7, I'm going to be able to play B minor and D major 7 ideas because your ear now is hearing that. So if I'm like, all that is just creating tension to go back to the
You gotta
one.
resolve it, though.
You got to resolve it though. If you don't resolve it, you're going to sound like you're playing in the wrong key,
Right.
which you kind of are for a split second. But you're not, because you're basically what you're doing is you're just taking the framework and the fundamentals of outlining these chords like we've been talking about all day, and you're applying those now in a way that makes sense. So when I'm playing in A minor, I don't have to think of this C major 7 arpeggio as some sort of, I don't even know what somebody that knows music theory would call that, but I guarantee you it's really confusing. And so if I'm playing over A minor, now I just know that wherever I can build a C major 7 arpeggio, and of course my ear is connecting this in a way that makes it sound like music because I like to listen to Wes Montgomery and I like to listen to people that use this concept a lot, and I kind of know what that's supposed to sound like. And so that works for me, but it is definitely a non-music theory way to start playing and expanding these ideas into something that's more colorful without having to, figure out how to launch the fucking shuttle, And so I hope you guys learned something.
Yeah. Thank you.